Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Limited Levelups Rare and Mythic Caves of Ixalan set review. So we are on day 2 here on Twitch. We are doing the Rares and Mythics, as the title of this episode might imply. We did the commons and uncommons yesterday. If you're watching this, listening to this, anywhere you want to find those commons and uncommons, you can find those on the Limited Levelups YouTube channel and the Limited Levelups podcast feed. Mark, how you feeling today? How you ready to look at some rares and sweet mythics?
Yeah, these are always interesting. Like, you certainly learn more about the overall picture of the format in the common and uncommon section, but the rares kind of give you an idea of where you might like start a draft, because usually the rares are going to be some of the cards you're happy to first pick. So looking forward to see today which way the drafts might open up, and always looking for like some interesting build arounds that maybe aren't exactly tied into the main themes, where it'll give you something that take your draft on a bit of a different path sometimes or others.
Yeah, and especially, I think we have a little bit of this, not a ton of it, but especially when there's an archetype or a color pair that might not actually be that strong at common or uncommon, but there is a really good rare for that that deck. It's good to know, like, hey, there's an A+ rare, and you can build around it if you want to. All right, let's just, without further ado, jump into it. So our first card here, we're starting with white, Warden of the Inner Sky. This is a single white mana. It's a rare, a human soldier. It's a 1/2. It says, as long as Warden of the Inner Sky has 3 or more counters on it, it has flying and vigilance, and has the ability tap 3 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control, put a +1/+1 counter on Warden of the Inner Sky, scry 1, activate only as a sorcery. So we got our first rare. And it's
that S word, the dirty S word.
Yeah, holding us back, not letting us have all the fun we want. But it's still...
Three is a lot more than 2 for this. Like,
right.
It's unlikely. I feel like it's not going to be a lot of times where you're just going to have 3 artifacts that are just lying around that you're happy to tap. And if you ever have to tap other creatures to this, like, you can tap itself, which is just fine. But if you ever have to tap other creatures to this, you're not really getting enough to make it worth it. So even though this is like a well-statted 1-drop and has potential to just win the game, I'm actually not that high on this thing.
Yeah, I do think that I'm not... So the fail case of this is you play it on turn 1, it pecks in for a point or 2, and then it kind of just sits there, and then you can grow it if the board is stalled or if you think it's a good thing to do. But you do have to be in a kind of specific board state or game state to really take advantage of this, because if you're the aggro deck, you might think like, okay, I'm stalled out the aggro deck, and I just want a way to push through, and you start tapping your things to grow this Warden. That opens up the window for any mid-range deck or opposing aggro deck to be like, okay, well, you're tapping all your stuff, great, I can attack you back. I do think that this is definitely an artifact card. If I'm going to put it in my deck, I want to have other artifacts, and I think that's true for most of these tap other artifacts and or creatures. You really want to be tapping artifacts. So do you want to call this a synergy card or a build around, or do you want to just say, you know what, I think most white decks are going to have enough artifacts to play this?
I think we'll just do what we did yesterday, and like, the grades are one thing, and of course when you do your tier list you can do it differently.
Yeah.
But for today, assuming people are going to listen to this instead of just opening up our Google Doc that has all the ratings, I think we can just give it the kind of in this deck where you want to play it grade.
Yep. And I would give it a C+ in that deck.
I think I was going to give it a C.
Okay.
I could see myself cutting this card even in like the artifact deck.
I think so too. Next up, we've got Fabrication Foundry. So it says 1 and a white for an artifact at rare. It has tap, add white, spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate the ability of an artifact source, so very likely crafting. It also has another ability, 2 and a white, so 3 mana, tap it. Exile 1 or more other artifacts you control with total mana value X. You return target artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, activate only as a sorcery.
Yeah, I think that this one, I'm guessing this got like depowered a few times during constructed testing. Because it's like the fact that you have to exile the stuff that you get rid of, so you can't just kind of loop back and forth.
Right.
And you're never trading up on mana. Like, more likely you're trading down on mana, because you might not have the exact right CMC totals or mana value totals. So for constructed, maybe there was something that this was broken with that they're doing it, but for limited, I think this is just an F.
Yeah, I think so too. Even in your heaviest of heavy artifact decks, well, okay, so in your heaviest of heavy artifact decks, I don't think it's an actual, because just it's a mana rock for your artifacts, for your crafting, whatever. It's still not a high grade, but it's somewhere in the D range. But most decks, and when I say heavy artifacts, I'm talking you've got 13, 14 plus. Most decks aren't going to have that, even artifact themed decks. And that last ability, kind of finicky. I'm sure you can do some cool stuff here and there, but not consistently. So you want to just give it an F and say, there is a deck for it, but you shouldn't really pay much attention to this card when you're looking at it in packs.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an F.
Okay.
You can diverge from that if you want.
I'm just gonna give it a synergy D, I would say, because I do think it's like a playable card in those decks.
Okay.
All right, what is next?
Next we have Get Lost. 1 and a white for an instant. Destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens.
So better or worse than Fateful Absence, which is this card, except it gives your opponent a clue instead of 2 map tokens.
Well, the player, because you can target your own stuff with this,
true.
right? Yeah. Pretty similar, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like, not exactly better or worse.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, recently from the last set we had Stroke of Midnight, and I didn't play Stroke of Midnight at all set. This thing, at least it costs 2, and it does get rid of a blocker. Like they can't, chump with what you're giving them. But it's still going to be pretty bad. I think I'm going to give it like a D and hope to never play it.
Yeah, I was going to go like D+, which is, a very marginal upgrade. But Fateful Absence was a playable, if not unexciting card back when that was a card in Midnight Hunt. And, you kind of take it late in the pack. It's fine, white removal. But you do really want to play this if you are making best use of this in a very aggressive deck. So maybe the opponent doesn't have as much time to get advantage out of the map tokens. The more aggressive your deck is, the better this kind of card is. And we talked about it yesterday. White's not all that aggressive in this set. So, I will actually join you at D because of that.
All right.
Yeah. Next up, he's back. Kellen, Daring Traveler. It's 1 and a white for an adventure. We've got an adventure creature, the only one in the set. So the adventure side here is... let's start with the creature side first. So Kellen is 1 and a white for a 2/3. It's a rare. And it says, whenever Kellen, Daring Traveler attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card with mana value 3 or less, put that card into your hand. Otherwise, you can put it in the graveyard. And then the adventure is Journey On, single green mana for a sorcery. Create X map tokens, where X is 1 plus the number of opponents who control an artifact. So basically, you get a map token, and if your opponent has an artifact, you get 2.
Yeah, so I think most time, like if you play it on turn 1, you'll get 1, but in the late game, it's probably going to give you 2 maps.
Yeah.
And then, like, the maps can see if your top card is going to be a creature with mana value 3 or less. But even in just, like, a mono-white deck, this card is quite good.
Right. Imagine you have, 12 hits off of this, let's just say. Maybe a little bit less than that. It's going to hit once every 3 turns or 2 turns or something like that. And even if you don't hit, you get that card selection. You get to bin a land if you don't want it. Quality 2-drop. Good value. And it's well statted, too. 2 mana, 2/3. Kind of want to give Kellen, like, a B+ if you're green-white and a B- if you're not.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was just going to give it a B, like a split the difference.
Yeah,
B,
that's fair enough. I think that's totally fair. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Quitseal's Flanker. 2 and a white for a 3/1 with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. You can either... I'm going to read the top one last. You can either gain 2 and scry 2. You can exile target player's graveyard. Or you can have it enter with a +1/+1 counter for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn.
Right.
So kind of a weird ability, but basically if 2 things died or bounced or were sacrificed of yours, then it's going to get 2 +1/+1 counters.
Yeah, blinking for, there's 1 or 2 cards that blink that also counts there. So a nice modal card. This is definitely, the power in this card is definitely in its flexibility, not so much in any given mode. I think that 3 mana, 3/1 flash, exile your opponent's graveyard. It's going to be a card you're pretty happy with a lot. In racing situations, flashing this end of turn, gaining 2 life, scrying 2, that sets you up for a good, kind of flip the script situation where you draw into some action, gain 2 life, have this attacker your opponent didn't know about. I think most likely the first mode is going to be the least often used because, 1 counter on this thing is okay. You really need to get 2, I would say, to really be happy with it, and 2 things just don't trade off all that often. And if they do, you're kind of like not that happy about it unless your opponent's just attacking you, you've blocked. But I think overall, it's a very solid card. Not super flashy, but you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, I do think that all the abilities have, like, a good chance of being used. So right? I would be surprised if... No, not equally, but, like, they're all very relevant.
Right,
It's not like one of them's just never going to get used. Like, each one probably gets at least 15% of the time, let's say. So they are Like it's not like just fake modality where it
No.
has three things, you only ever use one or two of them. This actually has options for you.
Yeah, there was the Callous Blood Mage from Strixhaven, which was like you make a pest, or you draw a card, lose a life, or you like I think Exile the Grave might have been one there, and that one you like almost never exiled the grave. That was just like you
Sure.
either drew a card or made the pest. And this one, yeah, I agree. You're gonna be more likely to choose any given one in a given game. So not super powerful, but very flexible. What do you like for a grade on this one?
Probably like a B
Yeah, I was gonna go B
again.
minus. Like, yeah, it's a little bit lower, just because I think no matter which one you do, and maybe I'm underrating just like any given one. Maybe you are just very happy to exile your opponent's graveyard. We were talking about cards that do that yesterday and how it's just gonna be a good thing in this set. So I'll actually join you there. I'll join you on B for Kutzil's flanker, and yeah,
Well, like, the default is going to be gain two, scry two most of the time,
right,
right?
yeah, I think so
And
too.
if you evaluate this as just that, it's like this maybe sounds ridiculous, but it's like not that much worse than like
It's
inspiring
flying
overseer.
overseer. Yeah, I knew that's where that was going. Yeah, the flying is certainly an advantage, but so is the third power. All right,
And flash. Like
yeah, flash.
there's
That's big too.
they
All right.
attack with their 3/3. You're really happy to like flash this in, trade with it, gain two, scry two, and like yeah.
Yeah. Also plays well with White's instant speed package or removal, that the defensive removal we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
All right, next up we've got a reprint, Resplendent Angel. This is one white. We've got a mythic here. One white for a 3/3 flyer. At the beginning of each end step, if you gained 5 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. And it's like, all right, 5 life's a lot, but it's got an ability. 3 white. Until end of turn, Resplendent Angel gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink.
Yeah, so I can't remember what set this was in initially, but I don't think I played it much.
M21.
Um, okay, yeah, so no, but
Yeah.
I think it was extremely good in that set.
I think it was like it was like one of the top 3 cards in that set. It was, yeah,
Yeah,
it was great.
and there's not going to be a lot of other ways for you to have gained 5 life,
Mm-mm.
but the fact that it turns on itself, like you don't really need them. Once you get to 6 mana, this kind of just wins the game.
Yeah, there are going to be some niche situations, like you could have 2 of the totes that gain 3 life and just like, have those on the board, sack, and, play your angel. It's a lot of white mana in one turn, of course, but I guess you could play the angel first and then maybe it doesn't die. Great card though. I think I'm just gonna give it an A, not quite A plus, just because it does just die to a removal spell, and your opponent has a window where it's just like, okay, if you don't get to that 6 mana, I can kill it, and yeah, you're bashing them with a 3/3 flyer. It's pretty good, but A is where we're gonna land for it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Sweet. What do we have next?
Next is Sanguine Evangelist, 2 and a white for a 2/1 vampire cleric. So that has slightly relevant type. It has Battle Cry. It's the only instance of we have one flashback, one adventure, one planeswalker, one Battle Cry. Battle Cry is whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And very importantly, when it enters the battlefield or dies, you create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying.
Yeah, just such a nice little package of abilities here. Super efficient. This is a card that I and a lot of other people when they first saw it, because this set symbol is very strange, and it looks like it's, if you are looking at it on a small screen, it's hard to tell if a thing is a rare or uncommon. I thought this was a common at first. I was like, holy crap, like this is, are they really going this direction? Luckily, not the case. It is a rare, and I do think it is a rare power level card. Really strong. Again, it's kind of like the 3/1 flash, where it's like not like, it's not over the top powerful, but the efficiency on this, you're getting a good amount of power and toughness. When it dies, you get something. Battle Cry is a nice ability on a token maker. I think it's not quite like an A level efficiency, but I think I would just give this an A minus.
I was going to say A minus.
Yeah.
When you said not A, I thought you were going to start doing the B level.
No.
I was going to talk you up on it.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, this is a really strong card. I think it breeds pretty strong, but maybe even a little bit stronger if you haven't played with Battle Cry cards before. Also, yes, Chad is pointing out that if you're ever in doubt, you can look in the bottom left-hand corner. The little R or M or C or U will tell you the rarity. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Abuelo's Awakening, X, 3 and a white for a sorcery. Return target artifact or non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters on it. It is a 1/1 spirit, with flying in addition to its others types.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting card here. So you're going to be reanimating, could be a artifact creature, Nothing wrong with that. It could be like the blue-white signpost uncommon that comes in, makes a 4/4. That's kind of sick. There's like a bunch of craft cards that have enter the battlefield effects, and then you get those effects. Plus, your craft card is now a 1/1 flyer. So just nice little card. Pumping mana into it, making like a 3/3 for 7 mana in the late game isn't bad. It definitely is a card that, kind of like a lot of the cards we were talking about, you want to make sure your enchantment or artifact count, like the artifact, is a high count of those. But if you've got 7-8 of those, I think this is going to be just a good card in your deck.
Well, the general case for this is that it's pretty bad, right? Like 4 mana 1/1, you need to get a lot of ETB out of that to make it worth it, even if you do have the option to pay X for it. The spot where I am considering it is with some boulders.
Just dealing 6 with your big old 1/1 Flame Tongue Kavu, deal you 6.
Yeah, and it cycles for 2 mana.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, a little reanimation there. So I guess, sorry, let me back up what I was saying. I agree. It's not just the baseline of like reanimating a artifact creature, not very good. But if you are reanimating one of those good craft artifacts, getting that ETB plus even just the 1/1 flyer, I think that's a good deal. Not sold?
Yeah, you do need you need multiple mana worth of the ETB for it to be good. So and like most of the things cost 2, so if you're returning like an iceberg, let's say, right, then it's a 1/1 mill 1 draw card for 4 mana, which is not great.
No,
like it's
definitely
okay.
Yeah, I think my words came in a little bit hotter than my feelings are actually for this card, as is typical for me. So I want to give this like a synergy, and the synergy here I think is you've got 4, 5, 6, 4 to 5 mana or 3 mana things that are craft cards, come with an ETB, also give you a spirit. If you have that stuff, I think it's like a B, and if you don't, you probably don't want to play it.
I'm going to go lower. I'll give it a synergy grade 2, but I'll give it a synergy C+. So yeah. I'm lower on it than you are.
Yeah, fair enough. We've got Thousand Moons Smithy here. It's a legendary artifact at rare. 2 white. When Thousand Moons Smithy enters the battlefield, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. Wow, okay. And it also says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, transform Thousand Moons Smithy. A lot of the rares are like this. They transform into lands on the backside. We've got Barracks of the Thousand here, legendary artifact land. Taps for white, and whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by Barracks of the Thousand, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token. Same thing as the front side. This creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control.
Yeah, so I think all of the uncommons that flip into lands flip into caves, and all the rares and mythics flip into just non-cave lands.
I believe so, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But this card is incredibly good. Like this is probably one of the best cards in the set, I would think.
Yeah, most likely. So it spits out, when you cast it, it's kind of like a Regal Bunnicorn type thing. It doesn't count everything, but even with Regal Bunnicorn, artifacts and enchantments artifacts and creatures were kind of the main thing. Obviously, you had rolls too, but just not that hard to flip, really, in the grand scheme of things. Or I should say, it is a cost to flip, tapping 5 things, but you're getting really paid out for it, right? Getting that land is, if the game goes on 3, 4, 5 more turns, you're just going to win.
And even with nothing else in play, this makes a 2/2.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it counts itself plus the creature.
Right. And it's going to be very rare. This is the only thing you have on board on turn 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
I want to give this an A.
Yeah, I was going to give it a straight A as well. Sweet.
Okay. Next is Unstable Glyph Bridge. 3 white for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, for each player, choose a creature with power 2 or less that player controls. Then destroy all creatures except the creatures chosen this way. And you can craft it with an artifact for 3 white. And if you do, you get a 5/3 flying artifact golem. And whenever an opponent casts a spell during their turn, they can't attack you this turn. Or your planeswalkers, and any opponent who attacks your planeswalker can't cast spells.
Yeah, and just because this is the first instance of it today, we'll just mentioning craft. Craft is you can exile this artifact, exile another artifact you control, or an artifact in your graveyard. Return this card transformed under its owner's control, and crafting only is a sorcery. Great card, right?
Yeah, this is like this wraths like this where there's like one creature left over are often kind of bad, but this one doesn't give them like a really good creature, and then you can kind of even make sure you still have a better creature than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they get to choose one creature and sacrifice the rest or anything like that. And then it flips into like that ability of they have to choose whether they're attacking or casting spells is really annoying. If no one if has played against that ability before, usually you want to like play a spell, remove a blocker, and attack, and you
Yep.
just can't do that.
Yeah, I was on some like like some Corset Angel or a Rise of the Eldrazi Angel, I feel, or something like that, and it's a very annoying ability. Worth noting, the front side, it is you have to choose a creature. You can't say no. You it's not like a Dune Blast or anything. You have to say, hey, if you have a 2 power creature, I have to target it. A?
Yeah, like probably because it just like catches you up at least. Like even if you don't have a creature and they do,
Mm-hmm.
you're basically clearing the board except for one thing, but leaving yourself with something that's going to be way better than that.
Yep.
So yeah, probably just another A.
Sweet. All right, next up is O'Hare Tack Deepest Foundation. This is 4 white for a 6/6 Vigilance Mythic Legendary God. And it says if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many tokens are created instead. And when it dies, transform it to the battlefield tapped and under its owner's control. It turns into Temple of Civilization. It's a land that taps to add white, and it has an ability 2 and a white and tap it. Transform Temple of Civilization. Activate only if you attack with 3 or more creatures this turn, only as a sorcery. So this is our first entry in the cycle of Mythic Gods. They're all big over-the-top effects in the front, and when they die, they turn into lands that you can then transform back if you meet some sort of thing that it wants you to do.
Yeah, these cards are super annoying, but at least they're all mythic,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not like too ridiculously statted on the front side. Like a 6/6 vigilance for 6 would just be fine,
okay.
Nothing special. And the backside of this isn't exactly free. Like you won't always be able to trigger that right away. So.
Right.
Still really good card though. It's going to be super annoying. Even the second ability of creating tokens, there are cards that make tokens here. So it's a 6/6 vigilance with an upside that dies into a land. Even if you never flip it back, it's still going to be really good.
Worth noting, it is creature tokens. Some of these things just double all your tokens, so you won't get double treasure or whatever. It's only you have to look at once again coming back to that tote. I feel like that the white common tote that makes 2/1/1s and sacks to gain 3 just like keeps coming up, and especially even when we're talking about these rares. So I do wonder, just this set isn't like Eldraine was very token heavy. I don't think this set is that token heavy though, right? You do have to do a little bit of work.
Well, you don't. If you have 0 tokens in your deck, you're still going to be first picking this.
Right. It's just not going to be like. I guess that's the main question. How much do you feel like that first line of text actually adds to the card?
Not a lot. Like I can only think of maybe 5 cards offhand that make creature tokens, so it's not often going to be relevant. But I think if you read it just totally ignoring that, I still want to give it like an A- type of thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna go B+. I think it's not quite in the A- range or in the A range for me. But if the front side was a little bit more, non-vanilla, basically, I think I'd give it in the A range. And we're probably gonna give some of the other gods an A, but I'm gonna go for B+ for this one.
Yeah, this might be the worst of them as well.
Right, which is kind of an indicator of what's to come. We've got so actually that's just that's all the white cards. We're moving on to blue now. Of course, there's not as many cards for each section. Moving on to blue, the Enigma Jewel. This is a single blue mana for a mythic legendary artifact. Enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add colorless. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. So generally it's gonna be crafting. It could be cycling as well though. It also has craft with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities for 9 mana. Okay, so that's 8 in a blue. The backside is Locus of Enlightenment, legendary artifact. Locus of Enlightenment has each activated ability of the exiled cards used to craft it. You may activate each of those abilities only once a turn. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, kind of a pipe dream, I think, to ever craft this thing. Although, for what it's worth, its tap ability can actually be fed into the crafting here. I think you'd have to be like really, really heavy on abilities to value this card. It's a powerful effect, but it's more for like a constructed deck than a limited deck.
Yeah, when I read that front side, I was like, oh, this backside's gonna be so sweet.
Yeah,
Like with 9 mana and this front side kind of does nothing, and then you flip it into the backside and it's like, oh, this also kind of does nothing.
yeah.
I think this is just an F.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just a few too many hoops to jump through too many deck building requirements you have. So we'll just give the Enigma Jewel an F. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Deep Root Pilgrimage, 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever one or more non-token merfolk you control become tapped, create a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token with hexproof.
Okay. So a definite merfolk build around. There's not too many cards that call it merfolk, but this one is. If you haven't played against these 1/1 hexproof merfolk, by the way, or just like 1/1 hexproof creatures, it's more annoying than you might think because, especially with map tokens or any augmentation, making them into like a 3/3 or 4/4, combat tricks, you can't respond to those, of course. So it's not just like hexproof kind of looks like a throwaway line of text there potentially. It's a little more annoying than you might think. You can't get blockers out of the way. You get to just gum up the ground. Your opponent can't do much about it. But getting to actually make merfolk, how easy is that here?
Well, so it's really weird that one of the common and one of the rare merfolk, like there's not that many already. There's not a ton of merfolk, and one of the commons and one of the rares each have vigilance.
Right, yeah, that's really funny. It's just like, here's my merfolk. Nope.
Like, why are you making it so hard for it? Like this seems more like it was designed to be a constructed card or
Yeah.
maybe like a casual card where you're doing like some kind of tribal thing. You do have the option to tap, like there's a bunch of things that say tap X number of untapped creatures or artifacts. There's crewing vehicles, which works as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is ways to still tap those creatures, but unless you've got a whole bunch of, like there's a 1-drop 1/1 that explores when it comes into play that would be great with this, but I don't think this is going to be something you want to do frequently.
It's a shame this one wasn't in the set with Intruder Alarm on the bonus sheet, because that's just like that's a pretty sick combo to assemble. Yeah, my read on the card is it's not particularly good. Like, number one, there's just not a ton of merfolk. Number two, like you mentioned, some of them don't work with this. And number three, like, you still, even if you do have merfolk, you have to be in a position where you're attacking profitably still, right? Or accruing or whatever. But attacking is the most common way you're going to be tapping your creature. So I think I'm pretty out on the card. It's another card, and we're going to see a lot of these, I think, and we already have seen. Powerful card, but it's very narrow and looks, like you said, a little bit more aimed at constructed and limited.
Yeah, I don't think it actually is an F, but I'm gonna grade it an F. Just
Yep.
like I think this is something people should stay away from.
Yep.
The fact that you need like this plus a vehicle plus a merfolk to do the thing, like a 3-card combo that gives you basically need to make 2 tokens to come out even on this, and then the third one you start to get ahead. Like,
Yeah.
just don't do it.
Yep, I agree. I'll give it the responsible F as well. Next up, we've got Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 legendary creature, Siren Pirate at rare. It's got flash and flying, so it's a pretty good baseline. 2 mana, 2/1 flash flyer. Whenever Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel deals combat damage to a player, put a chorus counter on it. You draw a card, and then discard a card. And if there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you can cast the card you discarded without paying its mana cost. Nice little Luterial Core callback, too, here.
Yeah, this is not like you're probably don't need that cast without paying its mana cost thing, because if you're hitting, like, that's already 8 life you've taken away and you've looted 4 times, so
Yep.
like, do you really have that much to spend your mana on that you can't, you're probably discarding lands. So I don't really think that free thing is anything worth of note, but card's still great.
Yeah, still a great card. Efficiency through the roof here. Kind of bordering on B plus, A minus. I think I'm gonna go B plus, but
Yeah, that's what I wrote down
okay,
as well.
cool. I wouldn't be surprised if you wanted to give it the A, but good card. What's next?
Next is Subterranean Schooner, 1 and a blue for a 3/4 vehicle. Crew for 1, and whenever it attacks, target creature that crewed it this turn explores.
I like how they are fine-tuning vehicles, because they when the vehicles first came out, they were busted. They were just way too pushed. Smuggler's Copter and Heart of Kiran, and then they like really powered them down for the next few sets. And now they're kind of like, all right, we can juice them up a little bit more. And this one is a good one. Like, this is, if you have played with Copter, the looter scooter, what's it called? Smuggler's Copter. I just said it.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar.
Yeah, this is like basically very close to Smuggler's Copter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of value on attack. Of course, it's always weird when you're comparing a card to a busted card because people are like, no, that card is busted because it did it on blocks and it fly. Of course, we're not trying to say it's the level of that card, but it's not. It's in the same zip code or area code if you want to use some Canadian lingo. It is still a very powerful card that I would be very happy to first pick.
Yeah, I love this thing.
Yeah, sweet. So what do you want to give it?
How high do you want to go? Like I'm thinking A minus, maybe even an A.
I was gonna give it an A. Yeah, I think that you play this on 2 and 3/4 does not get blocked very easily for a few turns, and you're gonna be able to just crew on 3, crew on 4. By that time, you may have open mana, so you're able to use a combat trick or cast a removal spell, and exploring every single turn, drawing a card, or putting a counter on one of those creatures. That's really powerful. So yeah, I'll just give the Scooter an A.
I think I'm gonna stay A minus. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't. You're talking about playing it on turn 2. Yeah, it's amazing on turn 2. Like, is it that great on turn 6?
No, it's not. You're right. So maybe I'll join you there. That is the true. Definitely want to consider all the game states that this might be a player in.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if I do want to give it an A just because, like, in your opening hand, it is. I'm going to stick with my A. Yeah, I do think I'm going to stick with my A because in your opening hand, I think you're going to have a pretty hard time losing the game. All right, next up we've got, here's a card that I'm sure you're interested in. It says, a Call Packle is first among equals, 2 and a blue for a 1/5 rare. It says at the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact enters the battlefield under your control this turn, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other in the graveyard.
Yeah, and this is each player, so you can even, Cogwork Wrestler on their turn and get a trigger on their turn too.
Yep, that's cool. That's cool.
This card's so good.
Huge, just like massive defense for 3 mana. 1/5 for 3 mana is just like the exact stat line you want in this kind of card. It's really not going to be hard to draw multiple cards off this thing. Selection fuels your descent cards too. Yeah, really strong card.
Yeah, I want to give this is it an A minus? Is it a B plus? Somewhere in that range?
I was gonna go A minus. I think that if you're in a deck, again, rating this as the deck it should go in. If you're in a deck where you just have enough artifacts that you're gonna be triggering it pretty much every turn, you're just gonna run away with the game, kind of like the Schooner. Sweet. All right. Next up, we've got Braided Net. This is 2 and a blue for an artifact at rare. It enters the battlefield with 3 net counters on it. Tap, remove a net counter from Braided Net. Tap another target non-land permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated for as long as it remains tapped, and it has Craft its artifact for 1 and a blue. The backside is Braided Quipu. Artifact, 3 and a blue, tap, draw a card for each for each artifact you control, including this thing. And then put the Braided Quipu into its owner's library, 3rd from the top.
I think it would be a Kipu. I don't think you pronounce
that sounds right. Yeah.
So kind of Tamio's Immobilizer that has 1 less mana and can do something later on that draws you a whole bunch of cards. Like I like a lot about this card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things.
Also, that shutting down activated abilities, that is specifically for craft, I think. So if you upkeep your opponent's craft artifact, then they can't craft it that turn.
Yep, good call. It's interesting. Like it kind of gives me Hilda's Icy Crown vibes a little bit too, where it's like an icy manipulator that then draws you cards. Except that, this one can kind of keep going, and I think this card is probably better than that card. Like that card, something we've come to learn is that the icy manipulator text it's good, but paying a mana every turn to tap down a threat is definitely a cost in this day and age, where every mana in the early turn counts, and you don't have to pay mana for this one to keep tapping things. So, where do you land on this?
I think I'm gonna give it a B.
Yeah, I think that's where I was gonna land too. It's a good card. You have to do some, not exactly work, but it's not just like cast this and it does its thing. You have to do some maneuvering, some finagling to actually get a material advantage out of it. But I don't think it's gonna be that hard to do that. So I like B for the Braided Net as well.
Okay.
All right. Next up, we've got Kitesail Larcenist, 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human pirate at rare. It's got flying and ward 1. When it enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 other target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kitesail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts with, the treasure text, and lose all abilities. All other abilities.
Yeah, this is really like minimus containment
Yeah.
with huge upside, like because it's. I mean, the creature's more fragile, but
Hmm.
this is so good. Ward 1, like a really good body. The optional ability to turn one of your things into a treasure as well is nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you could like if they had a what's it called the pacify petrification or something like that. Yeah, whatever the white aura that locks down a creature. Just go okay. Well, that's a treasure now. Yeah. Hmm. Oh, actually,
Petrify?
specifically that one won't work, right? Because that hasn't it makes it give it an activated ability. Never mind. But you know what I mean. If there is a creature that's out of commission, you can turn that into a
Well,
treasure.
yeah. What happens if you use this with the something that's been turned into like eaten by piranhas that makes it a 1/1 skeleton loses abilities?
I think that one works. As timestamp says now it's an artifact, right? And I not guaranteed on that, but I'm pretty sure that's a timestamp thing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on
Yeah.
that, but yeah,
Anyways,
I think
yeah,
it's
whatever.
great.
Don't have to get too much in the weeds of that right now. Yeah, great card. Just super efficient. We're gonna grade the super efficient, do a lot of good things, have a bit of protection cards really highly. I'm gonna give the Larcenous an A minus.
Yeah, that's where I'm as well.
Great. What do we get next?
Next is the Everflowing Well, 2 and a blue for a legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, mill 2, then draw 2, and descend 8. So at the beginning of your upkeep, or if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you can transform, or I guess you have to transform the Everflowing Well. It flips into the Myriad Pools, which is a legendary artifact land, taps for blue, and whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this, up to one other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn.
Ooh, yeah, this is a pretty nice one too. The backside, anyways. The front side's fine. So you got a divination that mills 2, which is good, right? Divination mill 2 is definitely more than just drawing 2 cards in this set.
Yeah.
And then Descend 8 is, like we talked about yesterday, not going to happen every single game, but in decks that are set up to put cards into their graveyard, I think you can get there pretty comfortably in a game. Just if you're playing for the long game, you do have the cards that set that up. And then the backside's strong. Just being able to copy sorry, it's not exactly copying it, but it kind of gives one of your things haste in a way.
Yeah, yeah, the backside's going to be like weird, I think, a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
because when to use it and you only get it till end of turn, like it's I'm not sure how to evaluate that because if you are crafting something, which is where a lot of your big things are going to be, like
Yeah,
you're not casting it.
right.
So you're not going to get your 6/6 inverted iceberg thing or whatever.
Right, yeah. Maybe it is actually a little more awkward than I initially thought. You're right. It's not as just generically awesome every single turn of the game. This is into play. Um, so we've got like a pretty good front side, but not great, and we've got a
Yeah,
pretty
it's like draw 2.5 cards for
yeah,
3.
yeah, draw yeah,
Thing,
two
right?
two and a half cards, and it's an artifact just lying on the battlefield. Maybe you can craft with this if you'd like. It's almost like 2.75 cards. If you wanted to really get into the specifics here, but yeah, I don't know. It's a solid card, not an over the top bomb, but I think I would give the Overflowing Well a B minus.
That's what I wrote down as
Cool.
well.
Okay, we've got Shauna's Tidebinder up next. This is 2 and a blue for a 3/2 flash at rare. It's a merfolk. When it enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, the permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tishana's Tidebinder remains in the battlefield.
Yeah, so this is like we talked about how if your blue opponent leaves up mana, you can play around counter spells by crafting something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a real punish for doing that.
Oh man, and I think this card is pretty uniquely positioned in this set, not just because of craft, but there are, like we mentioned yesterday, a lot of like artifacts that have a removal spell esque effect on them, or a lot of just enter the battlefield type things, and this is gonna counter your removal spell a lot of the time, or kind of a cheeky little thing, counter your opponent's cycling, huh? They just discard a card and you go, nope, you don't get your land. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, there's a lot like it is just a 3/2 sometimes. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a great 3 drop. It is pretty reactive.
Yep,
It's sneakily powerful. And
definitely.
notably if you do counter a craft thing, both the thing that they were trying to flip and the thing that they exiled to craft with it are still exiled. Like
Right?
they don't
Yeah.
those are just gone as part of the cost for crafting. So
Ooh.
not only do they lose the abilities, but they don't have those still in their graveyard or whatever to be able to craft with other things later.
Yeah, I kind of had it in my head that, we talked about yesterday that craft is hard to blow out because it's a cost to do the thing, but that actually works in Tishana's Tiebitter's favor because it's a cost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tricky card to grade. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to give it like a B.
I was gonna go B because here's the thing: even if you might have the option to leave it up, maybe it's a slower game, you're facing blue white, and the game's not going anywhere quick, and a big turning point into the game is when they go for that big craft turn. But against another deck, you can just flash it in. The floor is not that bad. So yeah, I like B.
Okay, you're with me.
Cool. What do we have next?
Next is Oher Pakpatik, Deepest Epoch. 2 blue for a 4/3 legendary god. It has flying. Whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains rebound, which means there's another one random keyword on here. Exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. And when Oher Pakpatik dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transform under its owner's control with 3 time counters on it. And it flips into, just like all the other gods, a land, Temple of Cyclical Time. The land can tap for blue, and also when you do that, you remove a time counter from it. And you can pay 2 and a blue and tap it, transform it, activate only if it has no time counters, and of course, only as a sorcery.
Only as a sorcery. All right, so let's just look at the front side first. So we got a 4-mana 4/3 flyer that will give you value, most likely when you untap. And
well, I want to stop you there.
Yeah, me too. No, I was almost going to stop myself. Go ahead. Please correct me.
There's not. We talked about how there's roughly half the number of instants or things with flash. There's actually probably even less instant because a lot of the things I looked up were flash cards. Mm-hmm. So there's very few instants, and the instants that you do get in blue, like there's not a single draw spell. So there's only like some counter spells basically, which you don't care about rebounding.
There's brackish.
And then if you're pairing it with like white, if you're destroying an attacking creature, like that's not going to do anything on rebound. Right. If you're pairing it with red and you have the +2/+2 to an attacking creature, destroy an artifact, that's not going to do anything on rebound. So even though it's easy to picture, oh, I get double my abrades or double my -5/-5s, like that's not very relevant text.
No, I totally agree. I was gonna like go back and be like, you know what? Actually, think about what we talked about yesterday. That top line isn't as exciting as it might read to a commander player or something. So mostly we're looking at this as 4-mana 4/3 flyer that dies into a land that will eventually come back. How do you like that?
Still great.
Yeah, still good. Can't talk it down too much.
If that first line were relevant, I could see this being an A+, but I think I still have it as like an A. Yeah,
I was just gonna go A-. Like I think it doesn't like quite like die to a removal because it does flip into a lane, gives you value, but I do think it is a meaningful tempo blowout when this gets abraded or gets gone by a 2-mana interaction spell. So I'll go A-.
Well, so I'm going to stop you there again. We're going to roller coaster on this.
Let's do it.
If you pay 4 for this and they abrade it, and you're talking about like, oh, you've lost that tempo, it flips into a land that within 2 turns gets you back that tempo you've lost.
Yeah.
Right? Because you get that mana for the next 3 turns. So even if they spend 2 mana to kill your 4-drop, you're getting 3 extra mana over the next 3 turns.
Yeah.
And then you can flip it again.
Yeah, there are other like non-destroy things. There's the pacifism, there's like the blue version of it. So it's gonna once in a while you are gonna get gone. But you're totally right about that. So
there's exile effects. I totally agree, but it's you mentioned the abrade case, and I wanted to talk like that's not actually even though that's pretty bad, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's important to make that distinction. Still gonna stick with your A?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll stick with my A on this then. Next up, we're moving on to black Stalactite Stalker, our first black card, single black mana for a 1/1 rare. It's a goblin rogue. It has menace, and it says at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stalactite Stalker. It also has the ability 2 and a black, sacrifice Stalactite Stalker. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power.
Yeah, and not as a sorcery this time.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Let's have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, so it's a 1-drop that is going to be insane on turn 1, but it's still going to be decent on later turns of the game, I think. So I think it's just a good card.
Yeah, I like we mentioned yesterday that descending is going to happen fairly consistently, like almost every turn if you want it to happen. And even if you draw this on turn 5, like the absolute floor of being like, okay, I block and then I sack this to maybe kill an X1, maybe win a combat. Like there are still use cases even if you don't give the time for it to grow later. And then yeah, like you said, it is fantastic on turn 1. So I think I'm gonna start as a Stalactite Stalker, giving it a B plus. Do you want to go a little lower than that, or?
No, I was thinking between B and B plus, and it sounded right when you said it.
Okay, yeah, this is part of why we do the set review, right? Just get to say it, put it out in the world, and the other person can be like, that doesn't sound right. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Souls of the Lost. 1 and a black for a star +1, which is not a stat line you see very often. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. And it has Fathomless Descent, which in this case means its power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1.
Yeah, so sort of a Tarmogoyf callback here. And that's a cost. Like, that cost is a cost, even when you care about descending, like sacking a permanent or discarding a card. There are some permanents that are actively good to sacrifice, but not a ton. It's not like you're going to get a benefit from that very often. So, Mark, as somebody who doesn't like, sacrificing things, paying additional costs, what do you think about this card?
If you're green black and blue black are both probably wanting to mill, and and white black maybe wants you to sacrifice things. So there is enough there, and I do think this is going to be pretty big. Like you're almost never going to want to play it on turn 2.
Right.
But if you're like super flooded and you play it on turn 2 and discard a land, it's maybe not the worst thing to do either. So I don't actually hate this as much as you might have expected.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things that make 2 permanents, just 2 rectangles in this set. You could also just, like you said, sacrifice a land. That's not that bad. Yeah, so your payoff is a reasonably large creature that will grow with the game. And that's fine. It's not over the top, but it's totally reasonable. Ooh, tough one to grade. Definitely tough. This is when I feel like the first time you cast it, you're gonna be like, oh, all right, I get it. It's gonna be actually like really, really strong or kind of weaker than you might have hoped to. I don't know. My gut says C+ on this, but that might be a coward's grade.
I was giving it a C-, which I thought was even more of a coward's grade.
So. we're both just like cowards hanging our heads, being like, well, guys, I guess we're gonna have to give this some grade. Yeah, you want to split the difference? You want to come up to just a C?
I'm gonna stick with my C-.
All right, yeah. We'll differ there. All right, I'll stay with the optimistic C+.
Okay.
Next up, we've got Terrigan's Journal. This is 1 and a black for a legendary artifact at rare. Tap, sacrifice another artifact or creature, draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery, though. They're just, just dangling that in front of us. 2 tap, discard your hand, transform Terrigan's Journal, and transforms into the Tomb of Aklazotz. And this is a legendary land. This one is actually a cave. Kind of funny. Legendary land cave.
You're right.
And it taps to add black. And it also taps and says you can activate ability here. Tap, you can cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it and is a vampire in addition to its other types. And just as a reminder, finality counter just means if it dies, it exiles instead.
So why is the tomb in a cave? Like how lazy were they? They didn't dig their own foundations?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
there's just I'm sure there's some lore implications we don't get here, just going over our heads. So it's kind of a funky card, and we're gonna see this in with some of the black cards, some of the gold cards, but the rares do support. There's a lot of rares that support the actively I want to sacrifice stuff theme. We looked at it yesterday. That's Black White's thing, and we were kind of like, okay, there's some stuff here, but it's not gonna be this like machine that hums and you're sacrificing. Like it's not like a black red sacrifice deck constructed with Oni Cult Anvil or something. I think that the rares will incentivize you to pick up those the draft card, the 1 in a black artifact that enters, draws a card, and when it goes to the graveyard does the same. I think there is a deck here, and this is one of the cards that kind of supports that. That being said, I think this is actually one of the weaker payoffs. It's still not that strong, but just something to think about. That deck, and Mark's like, is it not that strong? Maybe it is strong. Just that deck is supported, I think, at rare, or at least you'll want to get into it because of rare sometimes.
Yeah, I think like there's going to be a lot of times when you're happy to just turn a 1 or a 2 drop into a card
Mhm.
and like grow your graveyard and trigger descent and make descend at 8 an actual thing or whatever. And then when you're tired of doing that, like this flips into a pretty insane card, right? Like
Right.
it's just casting a creature for 1 extra mana, well, and like it's bought you the land. So I am pretty optimistic on this thing.
So my hesitation on it, I agree. All the land's quite good. I do think that the play pattern is just a little bit awkward. Like both the abilities are awkward. Because yes, I was just saying that you can have a deck where you set it up where you are humming along, you're sacrificing things, getting a bunch of value. But I think there are, even in those decks, there's gonna be times where you don't want to sacrifice anything, or it's a little bit awkward, and that discard your hand ability, like, can't gloss over that. Like that's not just a thing you can do anytime you want to.
Yeah, there's like pretty specific circumstances where you want this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're discarding, like, imagine you have 1 or 2 cards in your hand, like expensive creatures or something that
Mm-hmm.
you can't cast.
Right.
Like, do you really care that you're discarding those? Because you can just cast
You
them
can cast
again
them again,
anyways.
yeah. That's kind of the joke there. Yeah, no, definitely. I don't want to over index the kind of, I don't want to say this card is more awkward than it actually is. Just kind of want to point out that there is some tension there. Huh.
So maybe we're arguing and we're gonna give it the exact same grade again. Like, who
Yeah.
knows? But
All right, you go first this time.
I was gonna give this just like a C plus.
That's exactly what I was gonna give it to you. All right, there. It's our once per episode. Argue for 5 minutes and then just give it the same letter grade. Great.
Next is Corpses of the Lost. 2 and a black for an enchantment. Skeletons you control get +1/+0 and have haste. And when Corpses of the Lost enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return Corpses of the Lost to its owner's hand.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting that if you like bounce it, then your 3/2 haste is only like a 2/2, like on defense.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like slightly worse at blocking, and you probably want to block if you're like paying life to make skeletons. So it's an interesting design from that perspective. But this card is like just the 3 mana 3/2 haste that makes 2 rectangles is already like pretty interesting as a card, and this is a huge upside of being able to do it again and again.
So against an aggressive deck, it's still, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a 3 mana 3/2 haste. You can attack, you can block, you can trade off, and actually against an aggressive deck, it's still pretty good because you don't mind just like trade. Like one of the issues with an aggressive deck sometimes, or facing an aggressive deck, is you're forced to make bad trades in the early game just to not die. And this just means you can just keep going. You're not going to run out of cards. You're not going to run out of creatures. But then you play this against like a controlling deck, and you play this in turns 3, and they're like, how do I win? Right? Just like keep making 2/2s. You eventually turn to 3/2s, or the time you stop picking it up. A minus.
Yeah. You want to go as high as an A? I don't think I was willing to go that high.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think I can join you at A minus. I was thinking of B plus, but I think I'll join you at A minus.
I
mean, if you want to give it an A, you can still give it an A, but I'm gonna go with an A minus.
All right. Yeah, I just can't imagine this card being bad, and I can just imagine it being ridiculous in a lot of matchups.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. We don't have to argue about it too long. What's up next?
Next, we have Preacher of the Schism. 2 and a black for a 2/4 vampire cleric. Has Death Touch. Whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks the player with the most life or tied for most life, create a 1/1 white vampire token with lifelink. And whenever Priest of the Schism attacks while you have the most life or are tied for the most life, you draw a card and you lose 1 life.
All right, I'm going to be very sad if I'm wrong about this, but I think it's Schism, to correct you on one finally. I think it's Preacher of the Schism,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, so when I read this card, I was like, that, like, how, like, I was just reading it and going, all right, like, most life's gonna happen sometimes. Then I read the second line, I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It doesn't matter. It does a good thing no matter what. And 2/4 Death Touch is a really, really difficult stat line to interact with in combat. Almost impossible.
And you sometimes get both.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, but yeah, I didn't even think about that. Wow. There's a lot of cards we've seen that are kind of in that category of bomb that is just a super efficient 3-drop that gives you value. Like, not quite in the level of like a Adeline or a Wedding Announcement, but the kind where it's just like, you need to deal with this right away, or else it will quickly take over.
Yeah, like a Graveyard Trespasser type of card
Yeah.
where as soon as they attack the first time, you just feel like the game is lost.
Yeah, I think this one's also in the A range.
Yeah, I think this is an A.
Yeah, good on defense, good on offense. Yeah, I just give it an A. All right, next up we've got Bloodletter of Ixalan. This is 1 black, black, black for a 2/4 flyer. It's a mythic vampire demon. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead.
Yeah, so triple black is no light matter. That's pretty difficult to cast. But the earlier you can cast this, it's an extremely good card. So the question is really how much black do you need to be to play this? Because if you're just playing a normal deck with like 5 swamps and 8 of whatever your other source is, then this is almost functionally like a 6-drop.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that you don't mind like playing as a 6-drop. It's still going to have a profound impact on the game, but having a card stuck in your hand is never good. So let's assume you have a good mana base for this card. You're not just throwing in your 9/8 deck. It's a strong effect. It doesn't affect combat for what it's worth. Like it's not like you can
Right.
it can be easy to see this. Oh, it just doubles my creature's power. Not quite, of course. Your unblocked
Right.
creatures, yeah. And there are a few things that like drain your opponent for 1. Those turn into drains for 2. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we don't have to talk about the exact ins and outs too much. It is a strong card. So I think I'm just going to give this one an A- and just say it with the understanding that you have a deck that can cast it. Could even be the A range. I don't know. Where do you land on that?
I was gonna give it a B plus.
Okay.
Like I think it's so hard to get enough black sources to make it like it's probably an A if you're mono black, but it's just I don't think that's realistic enough that it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
So.
no, I agree with that. Yeah, somebody made the comparison of Tor Brand, which I think it is a little bit worse because that affects all of your things in combat too. But yeah, it's a good comparison. Next up, we've got Starving Revenant. So this is 2 black, black for a 4/4 Spirit Horror at rare. When Starving Revenant enters the battlefield, surveil 2. Then for each card you put on top of your library, you draw a card and you lose 3 life. Okay, interesting line of text. Also has Descend 8. Whenever you draw a card, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life.
Yeah, this is powerful, but also kind of a weird one.
Yeah, very weird.
Like if you're in the super late game and you're at 3 life or less, even if you find the like best possible card in your deck on top, you have to bin it.
Well, I would even say at 5 or 6 often you can't keep it because like you're in like a tense board state and your opponent you just attack all and go okay I can't go from 8 to 5 here because that means they can just kill me on their attack, right?
Yeah.
That said, it is just optional. Like you never have to pay the 3 life. You can just mill 2.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you're at Descend 8, then that's only functionally 2 life per card. Or if you're at Descend 7, you can put a card in the graveyard and then draw 1 and still get the trigger. Still very good. And like 4/4 for 4 with an ETB is going to be a good card. So I'm still going to give this a pretty good grade, but there is real downside to this.
Yeah, I would say so too. And one of the things to consider when you're playing with this card is I think by turn 4 you're gonna have a pretty good sense of what your opponent's deck is doing. But just look at their lands. Like if they're playing blue-white, don't be afraid to draw 2, right? Like it's totally fine to lose 6 against a blue-white controlling deck. Obviously, if you're facing aggro deck, you might just surveil 2, but that's totally fine too. Another kind of tricky one to grade here. I think the black cards have been sort of interesting as from a set review perspective. I think this one is in the like lowish B tier.
I was going to give it a B.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was going to go B minus, so pretty similar here. Yeah, strong card. Definitely a card you're going to be pretty happy to first pick a lot of the time, but does have some interesting play to it. What's up next?
Next is Terror Tide. 2 black, black for a sorcery. And Fathomless Descent. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
So a sort of modular Wrath. It's like it's modular, but it's very hard to set up in the way you would want a modular Wrath to actually work, right? Like you can't just be like, unless you have graveyard hate cards, you can exile your own things. It's pretty difficult, and even then you need to have like the biggest thing and kill all the small things. So I think you're mostly just looking at this as you're building up to just a straight kill all the creatures. But there's gonna be times when that's not true.
even if you try to be modular, like your opponent can also, if they, if they abrade one of your creatures
Right.
before this resolves, it's might kill the biggest thing on the board that you were planning on not having die. So yeah, I do think, like we talked about the magic number being at least 3. And for this card to be good, I do think you need to be able to play it on turn 4 in some portion of your games.
Yeah.
Do need to be self-milling, right?
Yes, I agree, because I think that if this is ever less than negative, like even -3 is kind of a little bit, you really want to get this to -4 when you like almost like descend 4 in a way. Yeah, tricky card. I think I'm actually gonna start pretty low on this one. I think it's like, just in general, wraths in limited that don't give you optionality are a little bit awkward. Not saying black is a good color for, I'm sure, just being good at grinding. But it's hard to get an advantage on this one. Or it's hard to actually flip this in your favor where you're saying, like, I'm coming out ahead on the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to start relatively low. Could be a little bit of a take, but I'm going to go C for Terror Tide.
I wrote down C for myself as well.
Okay,
Like, and
cool.
that's even in like blue black.
Yeah.
I think that there's not all blue black decks that are self-milling or even still gonna want this. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, and just, I always kind of shout this out when we talk about rats, but gone are the days where rats are just like generically awesome in all decks, or you can just like hold your creatures and, wrath on turn 5 when they're not expecting it. You just take too much damage in the process, so you really do need to set it up somehow.
Yep.
Next up, we've got the black god here. This is I said it right the other few times. Why couldn't I get it right now?
Yeah, I was so impressed. You did it so quickly too.
I know. Aklazot's Deepest Betrayal. 3 black for a 4/4 flying lifelink bat god, which is, I love this. For whatever reason, they were just like, hey, let's give this one bat. All the others are just god, but I guess bat was cool. So it's a 5-mana 4/4 flying lifelink. Great place to start. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, you make a 1/1 bat token with flying. And when Aklazot's dies, you flip it into a land that's called Temple of the Dead. Taps to add a black. And the flip back condition is 2 and a black, tap it, transform Temple of the Dead. Activate only if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand and only as a sorcery.
And that can be either player, so you can have 1 card in hand and flip.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Whew. Wow.
Yes, I don't think we need to talk about this much. I think it's just an A+.
It's just great. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, let's just move on. Great. Save some time. All right, we got Queen's Bay Paladin up next. 3 black for a 5/4 rare Vampire Knight. Whenever Queen's Bay Paladin enters the battlefield or attacks, return up to 1 target vampire card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. You lose life equal to its mana value.
Yeah, so I do wonder if anyone. I don't know if anyone looks at set reviews like a month into the set or whatever, but there's a lot of cards we're grading for best case scenario, and I do think a lot of cards like this are probably not going to have great stats on 17 lands or limited grades or whatever, just because they're not as easy to get going as you might think.
Right. Yeah. And something that I think we're pretty much on the same page on, that it's almost like when you start learning Magic, you're like, ooh, life loss. That really, like, I don't want to lose life. I don't want to pay life. Like, fetch lands. Newer players are like, fetch lands. I don't want to pay life for shock lands. I don't want to pay 2. And then you learn, okay, like, paying life isn't that bad. All right, like, you pay a little bit of life, get a bit of a bonus. My life is a resource. But then the flip side is like, well, yeah, it's a resource, but it's a resource. Like, you can't just give it up for free. It's not just free. It's still a cost. So that life loss is real. Obviously, in a vampire-ish drainy deck, maybe you offset that a little bit, but don't discount that.
Like that bell curve meme, right?
Yes.
Where like life loss is bad, and then life loss is good, and then life loss is bad.
Exactly,
depending
yeah.
on how much you've learned as a player type of thing. But yeah, so 5 mana 5/4. If you're not doing anything with it, it's just bad, right? Like,
yes. Yeah.
You don't even want to play that card. So you need to be returning vampires. So how many vampires do you need? Probably 6,
7. Yeah, around there.
Ish. And even then, it needs to be in your graveyard. So you need to have traded with it. Like, not a card I'm super high on, but I'm not completely discounting it either.
No, it's so funny. I think when you read this for the first time, you're like, wow, that's amazing. And then there's like just little things in there, like, okay, the life loss. And it's like, okay, you need a vampire, right? It's just, okay, just slowly turning the knobs down and being like a little bit less happy about it. So I was going to give Queen's Bay Paladin a C plus. I think that, or maybe B. No, I'm gonna give it a bit of a bump. I'm gonna give it a B minus. But I do really want to echo what you said. You have to be careful, and I do think a lot of players are going to draft this too highly, play an index where they maybe shouldn't, and maybe even play with a little bit too loose with the life total in game.
I'm gonna give it a C. Like
Okay.
even in the deck that has 7 vampires, which is not, I don't think, that easy to do.
Yeah.
You're not always gonna want to play this. It's not always gonna be great. So
Yeah, and just for a quick check-in, because this is something I don't even know if I think we mentioned it, but just for listening at home, you're like, we're like, oh, there's not that many vampires, not that many merfolk. There are the 4 main Ixalan creature types: vampire, merfolk, pirates, and dinosaurs. They're all in a set in some capacity. Dinosaurs is the one that is quite supported. They actually, that is like the green red archetype is dinosaurs. The other creature types are kind of just like scattered in there, here and there. They exist, but they're just not as prevalent. All right, what do we have next?
next is Bringer of the Last Gift. 6 black for a 6/6 vampire demon. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creatures from their graveyard that weren't put there from their graveyards that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So
Yeah.
It's basically a living death.
Yeah, they made a slightly cleaner way to template living death instead of just like playing that shell game of moving your your permanents from one zone to the other in exile and grave. Yeah, it basically is living death if you play with that. And living death is a powerful effect. Like just being able to, the ceiling on living death, which is this card's ETB, is you wipe your opponent's board, you get back a bunch of stuff. Now this is 8 mana. That was 5 mana. I don't know.
This is just an F, right?
Yeah, I don't know. You think just 8 mana just like completely not into it at all? Is that
Like my 8 mana cards need to win me the game. Like
yes.
we even saw
Yes.
what was the Moonshaker Cavalry from the last set.
Right.
That card like pretty much always won the game, but 8 mana was just not reasonable.
Yeah,
So.
8 between 7 and 8 is usually the break point where it's like, okay, 7 for a really good card, you can justify that in most mid-range to controlling decks. Then 8 is like you have to really be putting more mana sources or a bunch of card draw in your deck or something. And the thing that's kind of awkward about this one too is that to get to 8 mana to survive, you want to be killing your opponent's creatures, right? So it's like, cast this, and it's like, okay, well, they just brought them all back. So, yeah, no, I'm going to join you on that responsible F. I do think that this might not be an actual factual F, but most of the time, you shouldn't look at this as a good card.
Yeah.
All right, next up, moving on to red, we've got Dire Flail here. Single red mana for a equipment at rare. It says the equipped creature gets +2/+0 and equipped 1. So just the front side here, 1 mana to play, 1 mana to equip. It's a Bone Splinter. Craft with Artifact, 3 red. The backside is Dire Blunderbuss. And it's an artifact equipment, same equip cost, 1. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has, whenever this creature attacks, you can sacrifice an artifact other than the Dire Blunderbuss. Whenever you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature.
Yeah, Bone Splitter, not Bone Splinter.
Yes, sorry, I didn't enunciate.
Again, if people haven't been playing for years and years and years, they might not even know what a Bone Splitter is.
Yeah,
basically, like +2/+0 artifact. So that backside though is like that's a real big upside on the equipment.
Yeah, just being able to on attack sack a treasure. Or just like a trinkety artifact that's lying around doesn't necessarily have to be a treasure. You're fine cashing in one of your artifacts for a removal spell.
Notably, it is when you craft, it does exile it, so you will have to re-equip it to something. So the craft is kind of like 6 mana because you'll have to do it, or you can do it like post-combat if you have 5 mana. But I think some people will expect that they're just going to flip it onto the backside on the same creature, and that's not going to be the case. Having said that, though, I still want to give this like B+.
Yeah, I was just gonna give it a B. Chat seems to be a little bit higher on this than I think either of us are. Like, there's a lot of like busted comments in the chat, and I think it's good but not busted. I'm gonna stick with something in the B range. It's definitely going to be. You do want to be, I think, I was gonna say you want to be an artifact deck, but I think most of the red decks are artifact decks. So obviously not dinosaurs, but the non-dinosaur decks I think are just gonna have artifacts in them.
And you can tap it to things, and you can. Yeah, I like this thing.
Cool. All right, next up, we've got Inti, Seneschal of the Sun. This is 1 red for a 2/2. Legendary creature at rare. It's a human knight. Whenever you attack, you can discard a card. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until the end of turn. And whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card until your next end step. So basically this turn.
Yeah, so it's designed to work with those two abilities together, but they are separate lines of text.
Mm-hmm.
So if your opponent casts the craft artifact that makes you discard a card, or if you're really unlucky and they have the Bat God and they're making you discard that way, then you are still getting a free card every time that happens to you.
Right. Yeah, powerful 2-drop. Really powerful 2-drop.
Yeah, this I don't think so. There's some discussion when this card was first spoiled about whether you'd put a counter on your 1-drop if you just play 1-drop into this, and then are you going to discard a card to put a counter on it? My guess is that most of the time the answer will be no, but having the option to do that is still powerful. And then the fact that this basically has haste, because if you top deck it on turn 6, you just play it and then you get to do your attack thing right away. It's good on turn 2, it's good on turn 3, it's good on turn 10, it's good on turn 12. I think it's just a really good card.
Yeah, to really hammer that home, it's whenever you attack, right? It's not whenever you attack with this thing. It's just whenever you attack. Yeah. So what do you want to give it?
I think this is a B plus, maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna go B. I do think that, like, you said it's good in the late game, and I agree, but I think it does have, well, maybe not. I was gonna say it has some it loses a bit of luster, but not even that much, because like you just discard a land, you put a counter on something, you're probably gonna have an attack. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I'll join you B plus.
Okay, like it may even be better than that.
Yeah, it could be.
Discarding a land is often an upside.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like,
all right, what's up next?
next is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. 2 and a red for a legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many +1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a boar counter on Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Then, if there are 3 or more boar counters on it, remove those and transform it. And it flips into Tecutlan, the Searing Rift, which is a legendary land, which is actually a cave. Oh, yeah. I missed this. We have two of these flip into a cave. It taps for red, and whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value.
Whew. Okay, that's a good land. That is a heck of a good land, but getting there is not that... Well, it's not that hard, but finding a spot to discard your hand is not easy. Just paying 3 mana to just get a new hand, because you never know, don't know if you're upgrading or downgrading your hand. You also just, like, again, you don't, in your red decks, you're not always just gonna have a clean spot to just pay 3 mana for this. I imagine you're gonna play this kind of like a Tormenting Voice, where it's just one of the last cards you play, and maybe you just discard 1 or 2 cards. Yeah, tough one to evaluate. So what? Let me put it this way: what kind of deck would you want to play this in? Like, would you want to put this in an aggro deck, or is this just only a non-aggro deck?
Yeah, I don't think you put this in an aggro deck.
Right, I don't think so either.
Because it doesn't give you any tempo, and then also, like, the ability of the land on the backside wants you to still have spells in hand.
Right.
So I don't think it's an aggro card. In a control deck, how sad am I to play this on turn 3 is going to kind of depend on how the format shakes out a bit.
Yep.
If the format's kind of a little bit on the slower side like we're expecting, turn 3 is the actual turn you want to play this, because then you have more of a chance of descending and putting counters on it and flipping it more quickly. So I think a lot of how good it is going to depend on how bad it feels to cast on turn 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, sorry, I want to just quickly fix something I said. I said you had to discard your whole hand. You don't. It's just discard any number of cards you have. You can pick and choose. So it's just like a mega Tormenting Voice.
Yeah, you can even discard 0 and
totally
still draw a card.
Yeah. So really, it's like you said, it's the mana that's gating us here from being like, yeah, it's just awesome. Yeah, tricky card. They've definitely put a lot of interesting cards in this set. Also, a lot of interesting counters. All these flip things. They like a boar counter, a chorus counter, kind of cute. Oof. What do you want to give this one? I'll start with great, because I've been asking you that a lot. So I'm gonna go C+ on this one, just because I do think it is not trivial to flip it. I think it is a little bit awkward for most red decks, but the backside is really strong.
Yeah, I wrote down C, and again for kind of the same reasons.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, we got Breaches. Breaches is back. Breacher's Eager Pillager. This is 2 and a red for a 3/3 Goblin Pirate at rare. It's got first strike, and it says whenever a pirate you control attacks, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Either make a treasure token, target creature can't block this turn, or exile the top part of your library. You may play it this turn. Whew.
This card is great.
Wild. Yeah. Is this cube worthy? Is this gonna make the cube maybe?
Yeah, it could, but
Yeah.
like this is potentially like it's going to be even better here than in Cube because it doesn't even need to attack itself. It's just a pirate.
Yep. Just pirates and
And like even if you had no choices at the bottom there, if it was just one of those and it could be any one of those, it would
yeah.
still be a really good card.
Yeah, they really, we were even talking about like, oh, where's our fun? Like putting sorcery speeder once per turn. All the safety valves are off on this one. It's when a pirate it attacks, doesn't have to deal damage. Can be multiple pirates. You can get all three of these. Like, just the sky's the limit on this one. Well, I guess 3 is the limit. But I think this is another. Hey, this thing's gonna run away with the game. It's gonna be able to attack pretty well on its own. Even just like 3-mana 3/3 first strike is a pretty good baseline, right? Like forget about the other attacks. That's not that
Blocks
bad.
too, right?
It
Like
blocks,
it blocks really well as a
Blocks.
3/3 first strike.
100%. Yeah. You want to give Breaches an A?
Yeah, I already wrote down an 8. Yeah.
Great. Next up, we got Poetic Ingenuity. This is 2 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Has 2 lines of text. The first one is whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attacks, you can create that many treasure tokens. And then it also says whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn.
Another really tricky one.
Yeah, this is fun.
Like,
I like
normally
this.
these cards are just bad and we give them an F, but this is pretty powerful.
It's unfortunate that the second line make a whenever you cast an artifact, create a dino, feeds into the first one. The first one doesn't really feed into the second one. I guess it can help you cast more spells, and some of those are artifact spells, but it's not like a perfect loop by any means.
Yeah, like this is not a dinosaurs card.
No, yeah, great distinction.
This is an artifact card.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're making 3/1 dinosaurs, then you maybe get some treasures. Like I feel like you should almost read these abilities in the opposite order to understand what you're doing here.
Yeah, I think so too.
So if you do this on turn 3, assume like you're not going to have a dinosaur on turn 1 or 2 probably because there's only a couple of uncommons and I don't even know if there's any rares that do that. So you're basically giving up turn 3. But to catch up on tempo, like once you cast the first artifact spell on turn 4, you've already like kind of caught up most of what you've lost.
Yeah, exactly. Super interesting card. Yeah, so it is definitely, again, I think it's good to throw out like a count. People like the numbers. How many artifacts do you want in your deck before you play this card?
You need a lot.
Yeah.
Like you probably need at least a dozen.
Yeah, I think so. You have to be pretty heavy artifacts, which again, it's not that hard, but it's also not just going to happen every draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to see this in the middle of the pack and go, okay, I'm kind of going down this route, or maybe you're just red and I can go down this route and you take it. I don't think it's quite like I'm just going to pick one pack on this and take all the artifacts. I think I'm going to land this at a build around B for Poetic Ingenuity.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Cool. All right, what's up next?
Next we have Oher Axonil. Yeah, it's Achonil probably with the X.
X is SH.
Achonil? Right. Oher Achonil, Deepest Might. 2 red for a 4/4 legendary god. Of course, one of the mythic for red. One of the 2. It has trample. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than this creature's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to its power instead. And when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. And of course, it flips into a land, which is called Temple of Power. Taps for red mana, and you can pay 2 red tap to transform it. Activate only if red sources you controlled dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, and only as a sorcery.
Yeah, so this one reads a little bit more like a constructed card to me, because there's just not that many non-combat damage things in this set. I mean, there's a few here and there, but nothing you can like reliably pick up a bunch of copies of. And the backs...
Whoa.
Okay.
Okay, so if you get this, which is already like fine, like we'll talk about it without this card for sure. But there is the 1/3 that you can tap 2 artifacts or creatures to ping their face for 1.
That is true. Okay, that actually expressly fits that description that I said wasn't true. It's like there's no thing you can pick up a bunch of copies of at common. People aren't going to want that card very often anyway. So that's actually probably the card you're most looking for with this one that you can easily get.
Yeah, that just like if your opponent, like assuming you're not playing at bronze or whatever, if you're playing a mythic or whatever, let's say for example, not to be too elitist here, but if your opponent goes turn 2 that 1/3 and you're kind of thinking like, oh, this card's not very good, the threat of this thing coming down, you can just die out of nowhere.
Yeah, really quick, just like deal you 8, untap, deal you 8.
Yeah, I mean, with artifacts and creatures both counting, it's already that creature plus this creature is 4 damage, and then any 2 other things you have is another 4 damage. Like, I'm pretty excited to have that come up sometimes where you're like, I'm picked this, and I'm going to throw a couple of these random 2-drops in, and then some games I'm just going to draw them together, and you're going to get that screenshot equity.
Yeah. I do think this is a card that's going to be quite overrated, probably, because it's like this flashy god mythic that has a lot of cool text, and you don't actually piece it together like what it's doing. It probably seems a little bit better than it actually is.
Yeah.
So all that being like, basically we're looking at this as 4 mana 4/4 trample. Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Kind of can pick up some combo cards along the way, maybe. I mean, I like it. I like the idea of going for it. The backside's probably not going to ever transform back. It's just really hard to
do. I agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. So where do we land on that? I think that kind of puts it in the synergy grade for me. Like, you can put this in your deck, it's going to be a C, 4/4 trample. But then if you're building around it, depends how much you get there. Right? Like, it could be awesome. Like you said, you could just kill them on the spot.
I'm definitely not giving this a synergy grade.
Yeah, no,
like, I think the grade you give this is assuming you don't have the 1/3s, but like you pick up 1 or 2 of them if you have this and play them. Mm-hmm. But I think you're gonna play this like without needing any synergies.
Right. So you're never. I don't think you're ever gonna cut this from a red deck, right? Just like 4 mana 4/4 trample dies into a land. That's fine. So C+, B-, like somewhere in that.
I'm gonna go B-.
Okay, yeah, I'll join you. All right. Next up, we've got another contender for one of the best cards in the set here, Bone Horde Dracosaur. Great name. 3 red for a mythic 5/5 Dino Dragon. It's a flying first striker. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile the land card this way, you make a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exile the non-land this way, you make a treasure.
Yeah, so if you untap, it's just you draw 4 cards basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Really strong.
Yeah, A+, move on to the next one, yeah?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say just quickly, I'm not going to go too long, but I really like, we mentioned this about breaches, but on this one too, you often have these cards that like, okay, if I untap with it, I get value, and your opponent's like, okay, well, they're not going to really want to attack or block with it, so I'm just going to like, attack my 4/4 in. They're not going to want to block. I mean, sure, 4/4, maybe a combat trick still wins against that, but First Strike is a really good ability for, on these kind of things where you're like, well, I hope to untap with it, because they just can't send things in and try to trade.
Yeah, I actually don't mind this being, like, if they're going to put A+ in a set,
yeah.
First of all, make them mythic, which this is, and make them so that there's like, you can interact with this, right? Like, you can just kill it with a -5/-5 or an exile spell. So I actually, like, I don't hate having cards like this in a set, even if I'm not a big fan of A+ cards in general. So yeah, sure, I'll lose a couple games to this, but it won't come up that often. A+, and be on my way. Hopefully I'm the one who opens them sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you will, Mark. You will. Next up, we've got Magmatic Galleon. We've got a vehicle here. 3 red for a 5/5 crew 2 vehicle, not rare. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls, and whenever one or more creatures your opponent's controls are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token.
Yeah, so excess non-combat damage, this will generate of course, sometimes. But there's not going to be a braid and then the deal X damage equal to number of lands. So there's not going to be a ton of treasures being made by this, because like the best target for this is to kill an X5, right? So I don't think you need to really worry about the treasures coming out of this, but just a 5/5 vehicle crew 2 that deals 5 on ETB is still a really good card.
Great. Yeah, and I do think the first time, like, I would guess you're gonna kill a 4 toughness creature a lot of the time with this. Like, no, that's just gonna be the biggest thing in the battlefield, right? Like, yes.
I don't think there's actually that many 4 toughness creatures in the set. I think Circovitz did an analysis of like what damage spell creatures kill, what percentage of creatures, and there was a bit of a jump from 3 to 5.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I just mean to say that you will get the treasure benefit a lot of the time because the biggest thing that you want to kill isn't a 5 toughness creature. That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. You will get a treasure sometime, but I'm just saying, like, don't. You can evaluate the card without that, and it's still going to be a good card.
yeah, great. A minus.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, yeah. It's not quite like creature comes in, kills something. A vehicle is another hoop to jump through, but it's close to 5 mana, 5/5 come and kill something.
Like if your opponent plays the last card we saw, this is the exact card you want in your hand.
Yes,
right? Like,
definitely. Yeah, just like boop, boop, sweet mythic. Here's my rare. So
yeah.
I'm gonna land A actually. I think this is an A.
Yeah, I'll join you there.
Cool. What's up next?
Next is Trumpeting Carnosaur. 4 red for a 7/6 trample dinosaur. When it enters the battlefield, discover 5. And it has ability 2 and a red. You can discard this card to have it deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker.
Yeah, another pretty ridiculous card here. Poof.
It's just a slightly souped up inverted iceberg.
Sure, yeah. Your bomb and common from yesterday. It's the same card. I love the 3 damage here. So remember Herd Migration from Dominaria United? It had the cycling bit, like, you can pay 2 to go get a land, but if you really wanted to cast it to make a bunch of 3/3s, I know there's gonna be some players that are just like, I'm never cycling this. I'm never dealing 3 with it. I just want to deal that or get to that 6 mana. You should, you want to get to that 6 mana, but also just make sure you're looking at the game state, being like, should I just cast my burn spell here? And you want to hold out on it if you can, of course, but also be a responsible Magic player when you should.
This thing's somewhere between A and A plus.
I'm just gonna give it an A plus. Yeah, good early. It's good early, great late.
Okay, won't argue with that one.
Next up, we got Hit the Mother Load for red for a sorcery at rare. Discover 10. And if discovered card's mana value is less than 10, you create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference. No thanks.
So normally these cards are just Fs. Is this an F?
I think so. So are you like, maybe you're thinking just making a bunch of treasure is something you're interested in?
Yeah, like what can you do with, I guess, treasure in this set, right? Because obviously if you hit a 2-drop, you're going to be pretty sad, but you're getting 8 treasures out of it.
So imagine,
and then if you hit like a 4, 5, or 6 drop, you're getting 4, 5, or 6 treasure. Well, like 6, 5, or 4 treasure.
Yeah.
That's a lot of treasures.
Yeah, it's probably not a straight F. But
yeah, that's it's close to an F.
Yes.
But I think it's not quite an F.
No, I would say so too. Yeah, I guess with the blue-red signpost uncommon that cares about artifacts, you just put a bunch of counters everywhere.
Yeah, like that's
cute. Okay.
And that deck's already making treasures to like get you up to the 7 mana for this.
Yeah. We're talking like corner cases here for sure. We're still gonna. I assume we're gonna give it a D minus.
I'm gonna give it a D. I'm gonna go D.
Oh wow. really,
Brave,
really talking it up. Yeah, I'll stick with my D minus for Hit the Mother Load. All right. Okay. Gonna move us on to green here. What's our first green card?
First green card is Jadelight Spelunker, X and a green for a 1/1 Merfolk Scout. And when it enters the battlefield, it explores X times.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, indeed. Finally, we have the blue-green payoff.
Yeah. The first, that's one of the things we talked about yesterday was the Explore deck does not seem to be very supported. And then today we were like, oh, maybe the rares will support the unsupported archetypes. And there's just like not that many Explore cards that are rare either. That being said, this one's great. This one's fantastic. So let's just say you say X equals 1. Just like play it on turn 2. Not to say that like you're going to do that very often, but you're not that sad about it. It's a little bit worse than that blue common, like it's like the 1/2 that explores when ETBs. But fine if you're missing a land drop or something, or just need to double spell on a certain turn. And then anywhere past that, it just gets kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you want the top cards of your deck like not to be the best cards, right? Because if you're like casting this for 5 mana. And the first card you see is the best card in your deck, then it's just a 5/5 that's put the best card in your deck on top.
yeah, definitely.
Still good, but it's more interesting if you're like, yeah, graveyard this, land in hand, graveyard this, top this. Like you kind of, it's easier to picture the draw a whole bunch of cards scenario than it is to picture I guess I'm just going to scry 1 a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, you want to do all that stuff, and then the last card you see is the best card in your deck. So I don't think this is quite an A level card, but it could be a low A. It could be an A minus. I I think I'm gonna go B plus on Jadelight's Bunker.
I was gonna go B.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. And we've got Intrepid Paleontologist up next. This is 1 green for a 2/2 rare. It taps to add 1 mana of any color, and you can also pay 2, exile a target card from a graveyard. And it says you may cast dinosaur creature spells from among cards you own exiled with Intrepid Paleontologist. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters the battlefield with a finality counter.
Yeah, so first of all, I guess in non-dinosaur decks, you're still going to play this, right?
Yeah, it's a 2 mana, add a mana of any color, and hates on your opponent's graveyard. Like that is a very relevant line of text in this set.
Yeah, and then in the dinosaur deck, it's just really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it.
So I'm not going to give this a grade. I'm going to give it like an average case grade, I think, because I do think it gets played in both decks.
Yeah, for sure.
And that would be maybe like B plus, somewhere in that range.
I was just gonna go B for the Paleontologist. I think that, and the thing is, like, you can pick up a few more dinosaur cards here and there if you do have this early. You can definitely build around it a little bit, and not too much of a cost, right? Because like sometimes when you build around a card, it's like, okay, I'm taking this card that's not actually great in a vacuum, but it works with my payoff card. Most of the dinosaurs in the set are just like fine cards to put in your deck. So I like B.
Great.
What do we have next?
Next is a reprint, Growing Rights of Itlamok, 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform it into a land, which is Itlamok, Cradle of the Sun. Legendary land, taps for green, or you can tap to add green for each creature you control.
Yes, I see what they did there. Cradle, you get it? Like Gaia's Cradle? All right, so what are we doing with Gaia's Cradle mana in this limited set?
You can explore 20 with your Daylight Collector.
Yeah, this card is not particularly good. It's 4 mana to maybe hit a creature, maybe not. And then the backside, there's just like not that many ways to spend all of this mana, and might not even be all of this mana, right? It could just be like 2 or 3, which is fine. But getting to that is, jumping through those hoops, paying your 4 mana is not great. So F, I don't know. I remember the first time around, this was just like not a card you would ever play, and I think it's probably the same here.
I wrote down D minus. I can put you down for an F.
Yeah. We've got Huatli, Poet of Unity here. This is 2 and a green for a mythic 2/3. Legendary creature, and it says when Huatli, Poet of Unity, enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Also has an ability 3, Hybrid Boros, exile Huatli, then return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. Got a laundry list of words here. Turns into a saga called Roar of the Fifth People. So, first chapter, create 2 3/3 green dinosaur creature tokens. Second chapter, Roar of the Fifth People gains creatures you control have tap to add green, red, or white. Third chapter, search your library for a dinosaur card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. Fourth chapter, dinosaurs you control gain double strike and trample until end of turn. Wow.
This is one heck of a badass chick. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
She does a lot.
What a Civic Wayfinder. Man.
Yeah. Like even the front side.
This is good.
If you can never flip this, like if you're playing mono green, you still probably play this.
Yes, for sure.
She fixes you, and then again, even if you're playing no dinosaurs, being able to pay 5 mana to just flip into like, even if it was just chapter 1,
yeah,
create 2 3/3s for 5 mana for free on your card. What a card.
Yeah, what a crazy card. And there's like, this goes to the graveyard, so if you, maybe there's like, you can pick it up with like the dog, I suppose, the flash dog that picks it up. I mean, you don't have to get too crazy with this card, but there are some cute things you can do. Another A, maybe A plus.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go A.
Yeah, it's just so good. Like the floor is so high, the ceiling's so high. Yeah, just fantastic card. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Pugnacious Hammerskull, 2 and a green for a 6/6 dinosaur. So it's 3 mana 6/6 dinosaur. But when it attacks, while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it. So a downside, but not like that. Not always a downside, and not even that big of a downside.
Yeah, no, because this just blocks just fine if you want to just be a gigantic blocker, and it's not that unlikely you have a dinosaur. And if you are in a position where you're like, oh, I might just want to turn this sideways, yeah, it's almost like it's attacking for 3 over the course of 2 turns. It's almost like if you've played with exert creatures, that's actually pretty similar to what this is, right? So you're getting more damage up front than you might expect, but you don't get one on tap. You don't get to block that one turn. But yeah, like you said, I don't really think this is that big of a downside.
Yeah, like the fact that it blocks for free, and if you control a dinosaur, there's no downside. Like this is
It's great.
crazy.
It is just
Is it like a minus?
yeah. I was gonna say it is just like big dumb stats, but it's a lot of big dumb stats. So yeah, I'll give it an A- for the Hammer Skull.
Okay.
Next, we've got Sentinel of the Nameless City, 2 and a green for a 3/4 rare. It's a merfolk. It's got vigilance, and when Sentinel of the Nameless City enters the battlefield or attacks, you make a map token.
Yeah, so I alluded to the rare merfolk with vigilance that doesn't trigger your blue enchantment, and this is the one.
Yep.
Still a great card though.
Yeah, also really nice because you can, start exploring onto this thing, and then it can just keep getting in, and it kind of fuels itself, right? Because at some point 3/4 gets double blocked, and you can't get your thing, but if you keep exploring, you're gonna get some counters. You have a combat trick. Really, really annoying card, and yet another card that if you don't deal with this, you're probably gonna lose.
Yeah, this is probably somewhere between A minus to A to me, and I think I'm just gonna give it an A.
Yep, I was gonna do that too. A for Sentinel. We got Bedrock Tortoise. This is 3 and a green for an 0/6 at rare. It's a turtle. It says, as long as it's your turn, creatures you control have hexproof. And each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So we've got a 4-mana 6/6, just straight up, no downside, that has hexproof on your turn. All your things have hexproof on your turn. And it's not even the line of text where it's like the Dorian line of text, where it's like all your creatures deal damage equal to their toughness, only if it's beneficial, right? If you have a 5/2, it's still going to deal 5 damage.
Yeah, I wish they had made it the Dorian text.
Yeah, me too.
You kind of had to do a little bit of work for this and maybe slightly change how you would build your deck otherwise.
Yeah.
It's also kind of weird that like in green-white, if you're like boosting its power to get your triggers, then you're not actually doing anything.
Yeah.
But that's still like, so if you play this and then play the ambuscade, whatever, the +1 power, deal its damage, probably a bad example because you're only killing a 1-drop, but whatever. If you play this and then boost its power somehow and hit with your uncommon, you're still going to deal 6 damage, but you're still going to draw a card.
Yes.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it's augmented at that point. Or
yeah,
not.
so just I guess worth noting for that. But this thing is another we saw 3-mana 6/6, and now we got a 4-mana 6/6, and just tons of huge creatures.
Yeah, when I was reading this card, I was like, all right, it's this like 0/6 turtle, might be kind of a jokey card. It's like, oh no, it's just a great card. it's just a great card. A minus.
That first line of text is also really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's 6/6 for 4. I don't think it's. I mean, it's between an A minus and an A again, and sure, I'll just join you with an A minus.
Sweet. All right, what's next?
Next, we have Hulking Raptor, 2 green for a 5/3 dinosaur. It has Ward 2, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add green.
Nothing really to dislike here. I mean, you got a fine static creature, 4-mana, 5/3. Ward 2 is nice on these creatures with no enter the battlefield effects, like I talked about yesterday. And yeah, you're just going to get a big mana boost each turn. You're going to be pretty significantly ahead if you can untap with this. And it's, I would say, pretty likely you untap with this unless your opponent happens to have an Abrade or one of the very cheap removal spells.
Yeah, and Abrade still is like an even mana value trade with this.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily get into combat the best. Because by turn 5 when you're attacking, they probably have something with 3 power to trade with this. But yeah, if you untap with it, you got the 2 mana already, you've got the big stats, you've got the fact that it's a dinosaur, so the type matters. Not in the A range for me though. Like probably just a B, a straight B or B minus.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a B. It almost looks like it like needs another line of text. Like it looks a bit naked for a 2023 rare. It's just like, oh, I mean, it's good, but you expect to be a little bit fatigued at the end of reading the card generally. But yeah, I think a B for Hulking Raptor here.
Okay.
Okay, we got Cosmium Confluence up next. This is 4 and a green for a sorcery at rare. Choose 3, and you can choose the same mode more than once. Search your library for a cave card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Put 3+1/+1 counters on a cave you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature token with haste. It's still a land. Or destroy target enchantment.
Yeah, so first rare we've seen that incentivizes the Caves deck, which is not a great sign for that deck.
Yeah.
But it is a pretty good payoff for it.
Yeah, so I think the general, like, what you're often going to do is search for a land, make it a 3/3, or maybe search for 2 lands, make one of them a 3/3.
Or yeah, search for one and then make it a 6/6.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can stack them, and because that second line doesn't target, I believe you can, whatever land you fetch up, you can put the counters on that land.
Yep, definitely.
Or if you're just like super mana heavy, like there will be spots you probably just get 3 caves.
Yeah, or you just make a 9/9 sometimes.
Yeah.
That works, right? Yeah,
9 with haste if you have 6 mana. Like this
card's okay.
There's some stuff going on here.
Yeah, definitely some stuff going on here. I'm not blown away, and our hesitation about the cave decks is definitely going to carry over from yesterday. But I'm thinking.
Yeah, we've grading the caves cards has been so tough. This is probably one of the cards where if you open it, you're like, yeah, I'll give it a try and hope I'm the only one at the table who's going to try and do this. If you're not in the caves deck, are you playing this? Like if you just are in a normal green deck and you happen to draft 3 caves, let's say, I think it's still going to be okay.
Yeah, because like you said, you can always just go get the caves and put the counters on.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you're right. I think it's a fine card.
I want to give it like a B minus.
Yeah, that's about right. I think B minus for the Confluence, and it doesn't even. It's kind of funny. It doesn't even get that much better in a heavy cave deck, right? It's kind of like the other ones were like you really want caves. This one's kind of just like, all right, you pick up a few caves, and it's fine.
Well, getting 3 caves for either the deal X damage thing or the 5/5 lifelinker is going to be relevant.
Well, all I'm saying is that like a non-cave deck could take this card and pick up a few caves and it would still be fine.
Yes.
Sweet. All right, B minus.
Okay.
Next up, what do we have?
We have Oher Kaslem, Deepest Growth, 3 green for a 6/5 legendary god with trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card and or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed as Temple of Cultivation, which is, of course, a land, taps for green mana. And you can pay 2 and a green and tap it to transform it only if you control 10 or more permanents and only as a sorcery.
So putting them on the battlefield, that's big game. Just like making a bunch of mana, almost like discovering.
Yep.
It does suffer a little bit from just being like a big dummy that can just get gotten by a removal spell, but it's another one of these cards that's just like, okay, if I untap it, then I can attack. You probably have a removal spell or a trick or something that makes a profitable attack, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an A.
Yeah, I would say so. I actually kind of want to go A minus potentially. Maybe I'm being too tepid on it, but I do imagine enough board states where they have decent blockers and this just like doesn't get in. It's just a big dummy. But then again, that's fine because then if they want to get that out of the way as a blocker, it turns into a land. Huh? Yeah, I'm still gonna go A minus, I think, but great card and fantastic art, really good art. Okay, next up we've got Gulta. Gulta's back. Stampede Tyrant. 5 green for a 12/12. It's a mythic Elder Dino. It's got trample. When Gulta enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield.
Any number. Imagine all those cards you still have in your hand on turn 12 when you finally cast this.
Yeah, 0 is the number. You can put 0 creatures onto the battlefield with this card. So it's 8 mana, and we did talk about that break point between 7 and 8 on these big mythic or gigantic over the top cards. it's mostly just 12-12, which just the 12-12 is definitely nothing to sneeze at. But I don't think this is win the game on the spot. Like you said, your 8-mana cards you kind of need them to be. Yes, green casts 8-mana cards a little bit easier than the other colors, but like not that much. There isn't that much ramp in this set. So I don't think Delta's that good. I would probably just give this like a... I actually imagine you probably don't play it very often. It's like the cavalry from the last set, the big Crater of Behemoth, but gives your things flying, like you mentioned before. I think that this card is just going to be like, it just looks flashier than it actually... Well, it's very flashy, but it just isn't going to perform that well.
Yep, I wrote down an F for myself.
Cool. Yeah, I'll join you there.
Okay.
What's our next green card?
The last green card we have is the Skullspore Nexus, which is 6 green for a legendary artifact. It costs X less to cast, though, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, so kind of that Great Henge text. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness, each equal to the total power of those creatures. So a real mouthful there. And then you can pay 2 and tap it to double target creature's power until end of turn.
A lot of stuff going on here. So let's break this down. It's a 8-mana card that if you have, I don't know, let's say a 3-drop, turns into a 5-mana card. So that's reasonable. That's not too bad. The make a token when a thing dies. Note that is a static thing. It's not gonna change with how many creatures you have. It sets it at the time that you actually make the token. And of course, the doubling power is good because you can make a bigger creature. You
can make a bigger creature that's gonna die too.
Yes,
right?
yes. Sorry, I should have said that. That's
not just the token can get double its power, but also the things dying can give you the bigger token.
Right. Yeah. So, is this a green aggro card? Is this a green grindy card? I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I don't think it's that not super prescriptive.
Yeah, I don't think you want this in an aggro deck. Like, if we're assuming green-white is just going to be like try and like cheap creatures and combat tricks, I don't think you're going to play it there. But any deck that's trying to like ramp or play a bunch of dinosaurs, and I think that it's not just going to be red-green playing dinosaurs. Like, we've seen so many of these dinosaurs already that are just uncommon and rare, and A's or B ranges are just huge piles of stats. So I think this is going to make most green decks.
Yeah, I think so too. I imagine you don't cut it. Like, even in your green-white deck, I don't think you would cut this card. Like, maybe if your green-white ends up being super low-to-the-ground small creatures, like, you really have to be picky about your curve. But I think this is a good enough card. Like, just having a 3/3 and castings for 5 mana, I would assume is good enough. But maybe you feel differently.
Yeah, you might be right about that.
So if we're, has to be higher than a C or a C plus if we're saying all green decks are going to play it. It has a little bit of a clunk factor in the sense that like it is kind of expensive sometimes, and it's not just going to do a thing right away. It seems like it'll do an awesome thing right away, but it plays out a little bit differently. Like, your opponent has agency; they can choose to not attack into you, not block. Like, there is some counterplay there, but of course, if they choose not to block, you double the creature's power. But it's still good. I don't want to talk that down too much. I think I'm going to land on a B for Skullspore Nexus.
Yeah, that's where I was as well.
Nice. Jumping in to the multicolored cards now, we've got Abuelo Ancestral Echo. This is 1 blue-white for a 2/2 flyer. It's got Ward 2. It's a rare. Has the ability 1 blue-white, exile another target creature or artifact you control. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step.
Yeah, so really nice to have Ward 2 on this, so you don't really feel bad about dead weight or whatever.
Yep.
And this is a thing that you want, like, out of all the abilities you want on it, Ward is the best one, because you don't really want to get into combat with this. You just want to start getting a crazy amount of value with it.
Yeah, and this mostly, I mean, not mostly, but one of the things you can do is, like we mentioned, there's so many of these artifacts with like a removal spell-ish effects or makes a creature, and it's also really nice because those are going to be hard to, you can't really blow those out. If you target a creature, your opponent might abrade it, they might remove it. I mean, I guess abrade is not a good example because they can do that to your artifact, but you get a little bit more insurance. I think this card's great. I think this card's really strong, good value, really efficiently costed because of the Ward 2. A- for Abuelo?
Yeah, I think I could even see it being higher, but I think A- is probably reasonable.
Nice. Next up, we've got
like blue-white has so many ETB artifact trinkets or You can even run your boulders and just start blinking boulders.
Yeah, blink the boulders, exactly. Just boom, 6, 6, 6, 6. All right, we got the
Yeah.
ancient one up next. This is black, blue, 2 mana for a 8/8 mythic spirit god. It's got descend 8. The ancient one can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanents in your graveyard. It's also got an ability 2 blue, black. Draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value.
Yeah, this is a really cute card to set up the -X/-X Wrath into.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because you like play it on turn 2, and then you're like, well, I can't do anything.
Oh,
You,
no.
you better can't kill me before I do this. And then your opponent goes wide, and you're filling your graveyard, and then you just Wrath and leave this on the board.
Yeah.
I do think that this isn't a total like I think they've done a good job of making cards that look like they might have been Fs in previous sets that are not actually Fs.
No, yeah. So this is going to be. I do think you need to be a deck that is getting to set. Like the ability on itself, by itself, is not going to get you there. Or I mean, it could, but you don't want to be paying 4 mana just to draw a card, discard a card, and mill yourself.
Well, okay.
Times.
So let's go through a hypothetical scenario here.
Yeah.
Okay. You play this card on turn 2. Okay. Turn 3, you play something that mills you. Maybe it's like the 1/1 Death Touch that mills you too, or maybe it's the even better is probably like the 3 mana 3/2 that like scries and puts 2 cards in your graveyard. And that card finds you one of your land cyclers.
Right.
Either the black one or the blue one. Right?
Yeah.
And 6 and 7 mana. So turn 4, you can just pay 4, draw a card, discard a card. That's your 3rd card in the graveyard. And you mill either 6 or 7 more after that.
Yeah.
You're almost like you're turning this on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you just hit them for 1,000,000.
Well, not only hit them for 1,000,000, but you can just threaten to mill them out pretty quickly too. Like once this is turned on, you can start targeting your opponent with this.
Yeah, and it's also a good blocker for when you're just trying to do that. You're like, all right, well, this game I think is going to come down to me decking them pretty quickly. I've got a bunch of expensive cards in hand. Let's leave back my 8/8. Yeah,
and it's also like it's a pretty good 6-drop too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, if you want to kind of view it just as a pseudo 6-drop. Yeah, it's a tough one. My gut says it's still not going to be that good. Like all those things you described, like yeah, I agree they can happen, but I think that's still like some amount of hoops you have to jump through, or not even like hoops you have to jump through, just things have to go right in the game. But I agree, it's not just an F.
Well, I've written down my grade. I'm curious what you're going to give it.
I will give this a build around because I do think you do need to be descending quite a bit. I'm gonna give it a build around B-.
Okay, I gave it a C, which is basically the same as a build around B-.
Cool, yeah, okay, awesome. What do we have next? Another blue-black card.
Next we have Whale of the Forgotten, blue-black for a sorcery. Well, you can choose one of its 3 modes, but if you have 8 or more permanents in your graveyard, you can choose 1 or more instead. Those modes are either return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, target opponent discards a card, or look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard.
So that last one kind of saves this from being a really bad card if you can't descend, because it's still not a good card. Just 2 mana, look at the top 3 sorcery speed, but it makes it like at least a card you're not super sad to draw in the early game. This seems like you have to be descending 8 to like just like the last one. I think I don't want to put this in my deck if I don't think I'm gonna be descending 8 at some point.
So what would you give this then? I'll ask your grade before I say anything this time.
So again, this is another build around. Like it just has to be. I think, like we mentioned yesterday, there are going to be some blue-black decks that aren't able to descend 8 consistently. So if you're in a deck that you think you can do that, you've got all the parts, the moving parts for that, I would give this a probably the same as the last one, a B-.
Okay, so I think this is just a much more generically good card.
Okay.
I like the 3rd mode. We've seen cards like that be playable before, right? Where just 2 mana sorcery, look at the top 3, 1 in your hand, the rest in your graveyard. Like there was a card like that in Strixhaven. It got reprinted. I can't remember the name of it. But that being the baseline for this, even if you're never descending 8, you also have the option to do two other things instead.
Yeah, I totally glossed over that. This put the things in the graveyard. I like read the first part of the last one, and I just read it as anticipate. So yeah, no, I see where you're going with this, and I definitely agree.
Yeah, like if your opponent has one card in hand and you discard it and clear the way for whatever, like
Sure.
that's going to be really good. And then bouncing something can sometimes, especially stuff you have, it could just be you bounce your chupacabra or whatever. Whatever it is
Yeah.
you bounce is going to be really impactful.
No, you're right. You're right. I think I came in a little bit too low on this one. What would you give it?
I was thinking of just giving it a C plus. Like I
Right.
think I'm gonna every deck that's blue black is gonna play this,
Okay.
and that is like in this case the lower end of the grade. I think it's even better in the deck that regularly descends 8.
No, I'm aboard with that. I agree. I think I just that's a big piece of the puzzle that I missed. Just put the things in your graveyard. I'm much higher on it because of that. So I'll just amend my grade to be where you are. I think just C plus generically makes sense to me, and then it just gets a little bit better if you can descend 8. Cool. All right, next up we've got Molten Collapse. Red black for a sorcery at rare. Choose one. If you descended this turn, you can choose both instead. Either destroy target planeswalker or creature, or destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less, which isn't going to be very many things.
Well, there's a bunch of treasures. You can just hit a treasure.
Yeah.
There's like the goblin, the 1/1 that becomes a 2/2 goblin. There's a bunch of like there's the white equipment that's there's
No,
there's
wait. The goblin that becomes
well,
a
non-creature. Sorry, it's
non-creature.
non-creature.
Yeah,
I didn't read
non-creature.
that properly. Okay, so it does hit treasures and it does hit things you want to craft, but it doesn't hit creatures.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just got sorcery speed, like mostly reading it's the sorcery speed kill thing, 2 mana.
Yeah, so it'll hit like maps too,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, map token, sure, and that's good. Like that's like a fine removal spell, better than fine.
Yeah, sorcery speed, 2 mana, destroy a creature is playable. It's not
Yeah.
that exciting, but it's
No.
playable.
Yeah, I think that card would probably be like a B minus, C plus.
2 mana sorcery destroy a creature, probably worse than that, but sure.
C plus, yeah, I think C plus is probably where I'd land on it. And then sometimes you get to nab a treasure or nab a map or whatever, a little bit of bonus. So I think I'm just gonna go C plus for Molten Collapse.
Yeah, I think like the second mode and ability is makes this. I'm actually going to agree with you on B minus, but I
Okay.
think if it was just destroy a creature at sorcery speed for 2 mana, it'd be like a C plus.
Yeah, that's fair. Next one, man, this is a card. Polani's Hatcher. This is 3 red green for a 5/3 dino at rare. Other dinosaurs you control have haste. When Polani's Hatcher enters the battlefield, you create 2 0/1 green dinosaur egg creature tokens, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 1 or more eggs, sacrifice an egg and make a 3/3 dinosaur token.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is probably an A plus.
So much, yeah, just crazy amount of stats on board for your 5 mana. You're getting 8/6 worth of stats, and then next turn, well, I mean 8/7 if you want to count the 0/1, but then you're getting another 3/3 next turn. Yeah, just fantastic. I will join you at A plus there. Just great card.
Okay.
Haste is also don't overlook that. Like haste is fantastic.
Yeah, not just for these eggs, but like for any other
Yeah.
dinosaurs you play later too.
Hasty, big 6/6 trample Dreadmaw thing, the uncommon colossal Dreadmaw. Yeah, that's really strong card. Okay, what do we have for this next one here?
Sovereign Okinek Ahau. 2 green white for a 3/4 legendary creature. It has Ward 2, and whenever it attacks, for each creature you control with base power greater than that creature's base power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the difference. So just to kind of explain this a little bit in different words.
In English?
If your creature, yeah, well, if your creature has been boosted in any way, so if your 2/2 has become a 3/3 due to exploring or due to an equipment or due to a pump spell, for every amount that you've boosted it, you're going to be putting +1/+1 counters on it.
Yep. Which is nice. It's not I think it's not an amazing ability because you're going to be like pumping. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a little bit better than I'm thinking because like you just cast a giant growth and that's or whatever it's called in the set the +3/+3 and trample. Yeah, no. You know what? I'm talking myself up on it a little bit. That is pretty impactful.
And you can just like you have to untap with this,
Yeah, and you
right?
gotta attack.
Because it has Ward 2 and 4 toughness, so it doesn't die to dead weight or a braid. And then if you just like pre-combat give this thing +3/+3 and trample with the combat trick,
And if
like it triggers itself, right? Like,
yeah, that's
it becomes it becomes a 9/9 trampler that turn, and then the next turn it becomes a 12/12 because it goes back to a 6/6, but becomes becomes a 9/9 again. Yeah.
Right,
So
yeah. It's
yeah.
once you get the first, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to point out. Like once you get the first, all right, my thing, this or something else is bigger, it's just gonna keep getting bigger if your sovereign can keep attacking.
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet card. What do you want to give it?
I want to give it like you do need tricks with this, but I'm assuming you're gonna play some.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give it like a B plus maybe
Yep.
because it does require some work.
Yep, that's exactly what I was gonna say. B plus. Just it requires some work, but the work's not that difficult, and the payoff is really strong.
Yeah, it is annoying that green white doesn't have a rare that supports this. It's only the like one uncommon and this mythic.
Yeah, it is. It's a very very light theme of this. Like if your creatures are augmented or whatever.
Yeah.
Next up is Malia Benavides Aguirre.
Aguirre.
Aguirre, that's so
Aguirre.
close.
Yeah, that one I know.
Black white for a 2/2. Vampire Scout at rare. It's got ward, pay 3 life. Whenever you gain life, Amelia explores, then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20.
Yeah, a bit of weird text on this one. I don't think you're going to be just like I don't think that's going to happen in any games I play. Although I'm sure it'll happen to someone somewhere once.
Yeah.
Ward 3 is nice. Gaining life is not. I don't think it's that prevalent. From what I didn't do a big check, but I don't think there's a ton of ways to gain life in this set.
So I thought that too, and I did do a check beforehand, and there's more than I expected. I guess, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was something in like the 30-ish range. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty substantial. I do think that you're going to be able to trigger this pretty consistently. It's sort of like an Ajani's Pride Mate, but probably slightly better, I would say. And yeah, it's a bit of a build around, but this is another one of those cards that I was talking about for black white that it does ask you or what makes you want to do a thing that you might not necessarily want to do or lean to a theme that isn't as strong or as pronounced at common or uncommon. I like the card. Yeah, I would give Amelia a B.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah.
It is weird that this is like, well, black white's thing is sacrifice, and instead of sacrifice, this is around gaining life and exploring.
Right, yeah. It's kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Next up, we've got Vito, Fanatic of Axelzots. This is 2 white black for a 4/4 flyer, Vampire Demon at Mythic. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you gain 2 life if it's the first time this resolved. And if it's the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. And if it's the third time, you make a 4/3 white and black Vampire Demon creature token with flying.
Yeah, so the most likely way you're ever going to trigger the last ability there is with the white black uncommon that sacrifices stuff for free at any time.
Yep.
Is there going to be 3 things that you want to sacrifice aside from that uncommon and this mythic? Like, probably not happening that often, but this doesn't, like, it can be on opponent's turn, so you can block and then do some fancy stuff on the blocks.
Yeah.
So powerful ability, but I don't expect I'm going to be creating a lot of 4/3s with this.
No, I agree. I think it's mostly just going to be draining them. But just like with the life gain, I was surprised at how many things actually sacrifice. So you've got everything that says treasure. You've got a bunch of lands that sacrifice, the discover lands, the one that come and tap the caves that discover. You've got just like a bunch of like trinky little artifacts. You've got some of the white-black cards that have that sacrifice theme. So this is actually a card that it looks like it might be a card that, if you haven't looked at the card file, it's like kind of a strange commander card or once in a blue moon, but it is fairly supported.
I was going to give this a B+.
Yes, that's exactly where I would go to. And this is a little bit of a build. Like, I think you are going to adjust your pick orders when you have this card. Like, okay, like, look for those things that sacrifice.
For sure.
What do we have next?
Next is Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance. Blue-red for a 2/2 legendary human artificer. And it has an ability to pay blue-red and tap it to create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. But you can do it at instant speed.
Which is pretty big. Which being able to do it on your opponent's turn. Yeah,
really big.
Yeah. We have not, like, we've had kind of effects like this before, but not this cheap. being on a 2/2 and a 2-mana ability. Like that is very efficient for what you're doing here. You get into the battlefield effects. You get to block. You get to attack right away. Really quite a strong card.
Yeah, you can even do the old like end step, make one, untap, make one
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah, the old Kiki Diki trick.
Yeah.
I would give Saheeli a minus. I think it's just
I'm with you there. Very, very powerful.
Yeah, super powerful. And it's not even like, okay, it's a 2-drop and then way later you're going to activate it. I think you're going to just want to activate it as soon as possible to get a good enter the battlefield effect or whatever, just to be able to, get your money's worth. Maybe you send in a hasty creature, maybe just have an artifact that has an effect. And yeah, great card. All right, what's next?
Next, we have the Belligerent. 2 blue-red for a 5/5 legendary vehicle. When the Belligerent attacks, create a treasure token. Until end of turn, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Cruise for 3 mana.
Yeah, this is another pretty interesting one. So crew 3 is big. Like that's a hefty cost. We've looked at some crew 1s and crew 2s and we've kind of just brushed them off. But crew 3 is where you're getting to like, all right, you have to tap multiple things or your biggest thing. Because the thing about vehicles generally, just broadly, what they're doing is they're turning your small things that can't attack into relevant things, almost like an equipment would. And 3 is at the point where it's like, okay, I need multiple small things or I'm actually turning a relevant creature into a 5/5. Get a treasure. That's nice. Maybe you can cast a card off your library. I mean, most likely will, because you can. It's play lands as well.
You can cast multiple cards.
Yeah. Oh yeah, true. It's just like you just get future sight for the turn, basically, or reality chip for people.
It's like I think the average number of cards you're going to be able to play off the top is probably somewhere over 2, like slightly over 2.
Yeah, definitely willing to forgive the crew 3 for such a powerful ability. Yeah,
right. This is because it spots you a mana, it spots you a land, basically, because you get to play a land. And then however number of many spells you hit, you can probably play at least one of them, maybe 2.
I think there's just going to be so many moments in this set where you're just like your opponent plays a card like this, like these cards. There's so many cards where it's just like, wow, if they attack with that, I am in such trouble. And you're just like, all right, come on, deck. One time removal spell, and this especially does not get hit by many removal spells. Yeah, I like the Belligerent. Want to go A- on this one too?
I think so. Yeah, and it is worth noting we've given so many A-level grades this like review with the rares and mythics, and there's not that much removal. So I really do think this is a set where you are not just going to point your removal at the first thing you see. Like you've got to hold on to it and save it for whatever their bomb is.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. We've got Squirming Emergence up next. This is a sorcery at rare, 1 black-green. Fathomless Descent. Return to the battlefield, target non-land permanent card in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
So I have written down my grade for this. Can you guess what it is?
Is it an F?
Yeah. I think this is just an F.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just by the time you're getting to the point where it's like, okay, I can get back something good. The 3 mana is like that's the appeal of this card, where it's usually these are like 5 mana. But by the time you cast it for, like, you're getting to a point where it's like, okay, I actually want to reanimate this thing. It's just like the efficiency doesn't matter as much. And it doesn't work with the big joke for reanimation in this set, which is the land cyclers, right? You just can't get to that number very quickly. So yeah, I agree with that for Squirming Emergence.
Yep.
Next up, we've got the Myco Tyrant. 1 black-green for a mythic. This is a Elder Fungus. It's a star creature. It's got trample. It says the Myco Tyrant's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or sapperlings. At the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn.
Yeah, so again, we have a new typal card, but it's not very well supported either. Like, and you kind of need it to be a good card.
Yep.
Not very excited about this thing.
Yeah, it comes in as a 1/1. And then you... Yeah, it comes in as 1/1, and then you can descend probably just once on average. Like, we've been saying descending is not that hard, but I think descending multiple things in a turn is the next step above that. Yeah, this reads like a pretty powerful card, but again, like this, we've seen a few cards like this. Like, if you just actually walk through the steps of what actually happens, it's not actually that great. And especially, the tokens can't block either.
Yeah, every descend is basically 2/2 worth of stats because you're boosting this plus making a token. But it's yeah, if the 1/1s could block, I would be maybe interested in it. But
Hmm.
the fact that this has got to be your blocker and then it stops doing its thing, this is me like this might not be an F, but I kind
No.
of want to give this an F as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't give it an F. I think this is like, I think it's a card that you absolutely cannot just throw in a deck. But if you are heavy descending, like you are maybe even playing the self mill cards that we were talking about, like not being actually great in green. But there's some solid black ones in there. Like just imagine you got the and there are also there are some fungi in the set too. Like imagine that the 2/2 or the 2-mana black creature that 1/1 death touch enter the battlefield mill 2. Like that plays really well with this card. Not only does it pump it, but it mills 2 on its own.
Oh, is that thing
I
a fungi?
I think so.
Okay, and then there's also the 4/3 that when you descends also makes 1/1s like the
Yeah.
common and
I think there's enough stuff
yeah,
that
okay.
yeah,
All right, I'll give it. You talked me up to a D. I'll
all
give it
right.
a D.
I'm gonna give it a C plus. This is actually a pretty big difference.
A
It's
C
yeah,
plus. Wow.
build around, and I think this is another card that will not be high on 17 lands because people will kind of just throw it in and draft it early. But yeah,
So C plus. You're not cutting this in black green.
so I guess I should give it a build around grade then. Yeah, because you're right. It's I am going to cut it from a lot of black green decks.
Yeah, or you assume like most black green decks will support this type of thing for like a C plus,
Yeah,
right?
so I have to give like a synergy or a build around grade, whatever you want to give to it.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm scared at how different our grades are.
yeah, it's interesting. This is the biggest gap I think we've had.
Yeah, this is you're so okay. So if you mill a couple cards, I guess most of the time every card you mill will be triggering the descend on this.
Yeah, I assume that's part of the in the deck that this is good for.
So you play this on probably like if you play because you have to play this before you start descending, right?
Yes.
Because it's not like you just have a bunch of stuff in your graveyard and then you play this and it's huge. So you need to play this fairly early, in which case it's going to be a 3-mana 1/1 with trample almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next turn you untap and you play the 3/4 spider with reach that mills 2 cards.
Yep.
And then you get this up to a 3/3 with 2 1/1s at end step though. Like it doesn't even. Yeah, I mean I'm walking through it and I'm still not like thrilled with that idea.
No, I'm not either. But I don't think it's as bad as a D or an F. I don't know. I think that this is yeah. We've been lingering this one for a long time, so I don't have to go for too much longer. But I do think there is build around potential here. Like I don't see this as just like that's you were walking through that situation and that doesn't sound that bad to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So C plus. I'm not in love with the card, but C plus. All right, what do we have next? I think this one's one we're gonna agree on.
Anim Pakal, Thousandth Moon, 1 red white for a 1/2 legendary human soldier. Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on Anim Pakal, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim Pakal.
What a crazy card. So if you've played with the 3-mana War of the Spark Kremko, that's this card, but this card's just better. Because it's whenever you attack with one or more non-gnomes, not just when this thing attacks. Whew.
Yeah, this thing is terrifying.
It's just crazy. Also very funny, non-gnome, like that actually might come up once in a while. You're like, oh, this was a gnome and I didn't get my trigger. I think this is an A.
Yeah, I think so too.
Might be an A plus. Honestly, it might be an A plus. Like you play a 2-drop, you play this, you make a 1/1. I guess that 1/1 might not survive, but like sometimes it does. I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with my A, but I could see this being like one of the top 3 cards in the set or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Quintorius Khan is up next. Our only planeswalker in the set. 3 red, white for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Quintorius, of course. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, Quintorius deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. +1 is create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. -3 is discover 4. -6, exile any number of target cards from your graveyard. Add red for each card exiled this way, and you can play those cards this turn.
So I didn't do my homework for this one. When you discover, are you casting from exile or no?
You are. Yes, I believe you are.
You are. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's what you're doing with this, I guess.
Yeah, so I
Like
think
that's the static ability. It's not like it's just for adventure cards or whatever. Yeah.
no. It actually does play well with itself, but you're just gonna be like plussing this until it dies mostly, right? Just like plus plus plus, make 3/2s every turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the Discover 4 is actually pretty costly, but sometimes you're just gonna be like, all right, drain you for 2. Like that's what you needed to get you over the edge, and plays well with other Discover cards, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a great Planeswalker. It's maybe not exactly the +1 make a thing or draw a card -3 kill something like a lot of the template for all the great Planeswalkers are, but usually those great Planeswalkers pluses aren't as good as this one, right? Like this is
Yeah.
actually like make a 3/2 just straight up. So I'm just gonna give Taurus another A. Yeah, there's a lot,
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of A's in this set.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, what's next?
Deep Fathom Echo, 2 blue-green for a 4/4 Merfolk Spirit Rare. At the beginning of combat on your turn, Deep Fathom Echo explores. Then you may have it become a copy of another target creature you control until end of turn.
Okay, so just explore your return. Well, that's good. We like
Yep.
that. And yeah, become a copy of something. It's not that likely you're gonna have something that's better than a 4/4 for most of the
Right.
game. But like turning this into
Right.
a flyer is kind of nice.
Yep.
Yeah, just looks like a good card. It basically has an enter the battlefield effect unless your opponent has a instant speed removal spell that can hit a 4/4. Yeah, I think Deep Fathom Echo just gets a probably not quite at the A range, but B plus.
Yeah, I think B plus is fair.
Cool. We've
I
got
think I'm going to give it a B, but B plus is close enough.
okay. Another reprint here, Gashoth Sun's Avatar. This is 5 green, white, red for a dinosaur avatar Mythic. It's a 7/6. It's got Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. When it deals damage or combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. Put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield. Rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
So is this an F? I'm not sure.
It's closer to an F than an A. Like I do think that this,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's again, you're not like 5 mana. You're not winning the game on the spot. I did play my fair share of Gashoths back in the day, and it did miss a good amount of the time, even with in a deck with a good number of dinosaurs, because they can block, right? They can make it deal 2 damage or something and trade. Like 7/6 is not that large, right? It's
Yeah.
I would love this. Well, I'd like it more if it was like a 9/9 or something, because then it just has a really hard time getting blocked. But this thing just does get blocked. So yeah, I think you can probably just call it an F. It's a Dreamer's.
Okay. Yeah, when I was asking the question, I just meant is it somewhere in the D range or is it just an F?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's mostly in the F range.
Okay.
We got artifacts now. We're on the home stretch. Artifacts and some lands. Throne of the Grim Captain is the first artifact. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact at rare. Tap it to mill 2 cards, and then craft with a dinosaur, a merfolk, a pirate, and a vampire, plus 4 mana. Turns into the Grim Captain, which is a 7/7 menace, trample, lifelink, hexproof. When the Grim Captain attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Then you put an exiled creature card used to craft the Grim Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking.
Yeah, another nice one where you can tap. We talked about this yesterday with the blue uncommon, but you can tap it to mill 2, then you can craft, and it will flip untapped, so you will be able to block with it. I love having this card in the set.
Yeah, me too. Because it's not super, like, it's not like a once in a blue moon. You have the perfect deck. It's build aroundable. You can definitely pick up the pieces, and the payoff is actually good. Where sometimes the payoff for doing the thing is like, all right, cool. This is a actual payoff that I have a hard time imagining you losing after you flip it.
So how many total dinosaur, merfolk, pirates, and vampires do you like? Instead of saying of each, like how many? Assuming you need at least one of each, how many total do you think you kind of need to play this?
Probably, your deck probably has to be mostly those things, right? I think probably in the 10, 11 range.
Yeah, I was thinking like I might still play it with like 8.
Yeah, I can see
It
that.
mills 2 repeatedly, so you're
them.
gonna find them, right?
Yeah, true. Also, worth noting, this is a colorless card, but it's probably best in black-green, because black-green touches all of the creature types there.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then you also like you want descended stuff too.
Oh, sorry, it doesn't do pirates. Pirates used to be in black too. Maybe there might be 1 or 2, but mostly it's I think pirates actually scratch what I just said. But black-green is one of the better color combinations, anyways.
Okay, yeah, and then your green might give you fixing for your, or maybe maybe you're playing red and pirates are giving you the treasure to play the other stuff. Like
Sure,
yeah,
yeah.
I haven't really thought it through fully, but I love the design on this card.
Oh yeah, chat says there are some black pirates in the set. So okay, so yeah, that my interesting thought does pan out here. What do you want to give it though?
Okay. Well, it has to get a build around
Yes.
grade, and build around.
Is it a build around A?
Like
Like
yeah,
when you
like
do the
it's so
thing,
good. If you're building around it, it's incredibly
it's an A.
good. So yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure, build around it.
build around A, but you do have to like jump through quite a few hoops. All right. We've
Yeah.
got an equipment up next. This is Tarian's Soul Cleaver, single mana for a rare equipment. Equipped creature has Vigilance, and whenever another artifact or creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature. Equip cost is 2.
I'm not seeing this.
No, same. I like even if you are that all-in sacrifice deck, it's not like it goes on. If it was like on this Soul Cleaver and you can like keep moving it around, I would be much more into it. But you kind of do a bunch of work, and then you might just kill your thing. So I do not think this is a good card.
Yeah, it is notable that it triggers off of both players' stuff.
Yeah, certainly.
Which is really big. But you want to put it on your creature that's not getting into combat probably because you want to trade with other stuff. And then how much bigger does the creature that you don't want to get in combat have to be for you to start getting into combat and
Right.
and reaping the rewards of this boost? So I don't see it. I think it's probably somewhere in the D range for me.
Yeah, not like absolutely unplayable, but it just like doesn't pull you ahead in the way you would want a card like this to do so. So yeah, I'm pretty out on it.
So I'm just gonna give it a D.
I was gonna give it a
what
D
do you
too.
want?
Yeah, I like D.
Okay. Okay.
What do we have next?
Next we have the Millennium Calendar. 1 mana for a mythic legendary artifact. Whenever you untap one or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Pay 2 mana and tap it to double the number of time counters on the Millennium Calendar. And when there are 1,000 or more time counters on it, sacrifice it, and each opponent loses 1,000 life.
So the math just doesn't work for us limited players for this. We're just not going to get enough turns, not enough untap steps. It's just a straight off, unfortunately. I mean, it's kind of like a meme build around. I'm sure you could kind of build around it. I'm sure I will at some point in this set's lifespan. But for competitive play, no, it's an F.
Yeah.
Next up, reprint Treasure Map. 2 mana for an artifact at rare. 1 tap scry. Put a landmark counter on Treasure Map. Then if there are 3 or more landmark counters, you remove those counters and transform it. And you make 3 treasure tokens. The backside is a land called Treasure Cove. It taps to add Colorless, or tap, sack a treasure, draw a card.
Yeah, this card's I didn't play in the set that it was initially in, but I've seen it pop up in odd like cubes here and there, and if it's good enough for cube, it's probably still pretty decent here.
Yeah, I actually think it was it's kind of more of like a fan favorite than like a great card. It is a little bit clunkier than I think you'd like it to be, but it's solid. I would give it a C+.
Yeah, that's what I was going to give it as well.
Cool.
Okay.
Next up, we've got Matt Zalantli, the Great Door. 3 mana for an artifact, legendary artifact at rare. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. 4, tap it to transform it, and activate only if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. So kind of like Delirium for people who play with Delirium. Backside is the Core. It's a legendary land with tap, add X mana of 1 color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, you kind of wish the backside was better. Like, just getting a looter is not great for 3 mana that has no board impact. And then 4 mana to flip it is a lot. Like, I mean, you get that mana back, kind of, but not very high on this card.
No, I don't think so either. I think maybe it's like a card you pick up really late in your heaviest of Descent decks that just don't mind you're really going, and you don't have to spend a pick on it. It's like kind of a low tier playable there, but no, I would just give this like a D-.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's like some reanimator stuff going on, so like maybe there, but yeah.
What do we have next?
Roaming Throne, 4 mana for a 4/4 artifact creature golem. It is a rare. It has Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It is the chosen type in addition to its other types. And if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time.
So I guess your explore creatures, like your exploring merfolk, will explore twice.
Yeah,
Your vampires are mostly activated abilities. Your pirates are, but there's a few triggered
make
abilities in there.
treasures. You can make extra
Treasure,
treasures.
yeah, definitely. And your
Yeah.
dinosaurs have a few abilities here and there. All in all, it's a 4 mana 4/4 ward 2, which is like playable. Like you can certainly put that in your deck and not be embarrassed. But I think you would want maybe 3 or 4 ways to actually get a little bit of value out of it first before you're excited about it.
I think this card's still good.
Yeah,
I wanted to give it like a B minus.
I was gonna just go like a C. But
Okay.
yeah, you feel like you're gonna be able to like get good value out of the ability, or are you just like happier with that baseline than I am?
Yeah, there's like enough creatures that do like well, even just the baseline, it's always castable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're always going to be able to play this on curve.
Yeah.
4 mana 4/4 with Ward 2 is not the worst, and then there's a bunch of things that want to craft artifacts. So like just having a creature you can trade with. I don't know. I see it
Yeah, I wonder if
being.
this. We'll get a good sense of this as we play, of course. But I wonder if this is going to be like a. It's kind of hard to make this so you don't have creatures in your deck that actually help this card, or is it going to be like, well, you actually have to put some work in? And I think you are right that there are a lot of triggered abilities. We talked about a lot of ETBs in the set, so yeah. And you don't even have. I was thinking, okay, you call a pirate, you call one of the main creature types, but like you could call Chupacabra or whatever and just get your double
You can call
Chupacabra.
whatever you have in your hand. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'll come up with I'll come to B minus with you as well for this card.
Okay.
All right, next up we've got Chimil, the Inner Sun, 6 mana for a mythic legendary artifact. Spells you control cannot be countered, and at the beginning of your end step, discover 5. Ooh.
So this card is gonna be the biggest like finger crossed for like what your first hit is.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if your first hit is a 1 or a 2 drop, you might just lose the game. If your first hit is something anywhere reasonable sized, you probably just win the game.
Yeah, I think so too, because that first thing stabilizes you, and then you're just gonna keep on going and going and going. And I think we mentioned this yesterday, but not that this looks like an aggro card by any means, but these discover cards play a little bit better in your mid-range and controlling deck, so you actually have the possibility of hitting 5s and 4s pretty often, or a little bit more often than some low curve decks. I do think this is like I think you're going to first pick this out of most packs. No.
Yes. I
Yes.
agree. I think it's somewhere in the B range, and it might even be like a B plus.
Yeah, I think there are going to be commons and uncommons that are better, but colorless is a big deal too. So I think B plus for Chimil.
Good.
Cool. Next up, we've got Threefold Thunderhulk. That's a good name too. 7 mana for an artifact creature gnome. It's a rare. It's a 0/0, but it enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever Threefold Thunderhulk enters the battlefield or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power, and you can pay 2, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Threefold Thunderhulk.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of
So
like,
it comes like unless there's some fancy thing where you have a ton of mana and you're using a combat trick in response to that triggered ability. Although wait, does it work with the? It works with the roaming throne. No.
yeah, sure
You
does.
mean
Call
gnome? You
gnome,
can
yeah.
get.
Honestly,
Yeah. Oh, now we're cooking.
well,
Okay.
I wonder if gnome.
Yeah.
I wonder if gnome is actually a good creature type to call with it. Now that I think about it, because you've got like that the 4 mana ramp creature, the 3/2 artifact creature. You've got like the 2
The thing that
mana.
makes a map.
Yeah, it makes a map. You've got the one that you can sacrifice to exile cards in your opponent's graveyard and discover. Maybe that's
That doesn't work, right? It's
trigger.
only triggered,
Oh, it's
not.
sack. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, sorry, you're right.
No, wait.
No.
No, that's a trigger too, isn't it? You're
Well,
right
you
because it's
sack
a
it and you
sacrifice.
pay.
Then it goes to the graveyard here.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. That works. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that's
yeah. So that works.
that's the secret sauce for our roaming throne. Anyways, just small aside here.
Yeah,
So
anyway, so this is most of the time going to be a 3/3 that makes 3 artifacts, and then if you untap with it, your opponent is just going to have a complete nightmare.
yes.
And it blocks well because the stats are divided. Very very good card.
Yeah, even if your opponent kills this right away, you're gonna have a lot of blockers. It's not like the nightmare scenario with these expensive cards. Just like, all right, get it out of the way, attack you for a bunch. That's not gonna happen here. At least if they kill it, you get a little bit of a life buffer. Still 7 mana.
Yeah, when this when this was first spoiled, I saw the 7 mana and I was like, I don't really see it. Like we've just been playing a ton of WoW, but I do think this format is slightly on the slower side. And if you can get to 7 most games, this card's going to be very strong.
Yes, I agree with that. So another one that I think you're just going to be pick one, pack one in pretty much every pack. A minus?
Yeah, I wrote A minus for myself.
A minus for the threefold Thunderhulk. Next up, we got some lands, and we're completing the cycle of those creature lands that we saw from the last set in Eldraine, the really powerful ones, the ones they've kind of juiced a little bit. I think these ones are actually a little bit worse, but maybe not. Maybe just I'm just used to the power of the stuff like the Cottage and those other great ones. But the first one here is Restless Anchorage. This is a blue-white land, enters the battlefield tapped, as blue-white, of course. 1 blue-white. Until end of turn, Restless Anchorage becomes a 2/3 white and blue flying creature. It's still a land, and when it attacks, you make a map token.
So this is like these lands. You're never cutting them if you're playing those colors, so they're already better than C pluses.
Yep.
This one, I think most of these lands are either going to be like B minuses up to B and maybe B plus, and I think this one's a B. Like it's just really good.
Yeah, I would say B. It's nice that you get to like. It's like card advantage. It's you're kind of getting a few points while you're getting your card advantage. You can even go like after combat, map token, put it on the anchorage, keep growing the anchorage, right? Get some counters on there. So yeah, I like B for the Restless Anchorage. Next up, we've got Restless Reef. So this is the blue-black one. All the same text, enters the battlefield tapped, add blue-black. The ability is 2 blue-black until end of turn. Restless Reef becomes a 4/4 blue and black shark creature token, or shark creature with death touch. And whenever it attacks, target player mills 4 cards.
Yeah, 4/4 Death Touch, mill 4. This is another B, I think. Yeah. It's great.
Beefy. Yeah. Gonna be milling yourself most often, but definitely look for that turning point in the game where you're like, well, I can get in with 3 attacks with this, and they've already been self-milling it a little bit. So yeah, let's just get in there.
Like the first one almost always targets you, but I think most likely, like once you've got 8 permanents in your graveyard, you don't need more.
Totally.
So you're just going to target your opponent after that.
Yep. Although, you might turn on their Descent. Although it's going to be a thing where you decide in game if that's the thing that actually matters. Maybe they're playing green-white and you're like, who cares?
Right.
All right, what's the next one?
Restless Vents, the black-red land, enters taps for black-red. And 1 black-red, it becomes a 2/3 insect with menace. When it attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card.
Yeah. Another pretty good one. Kind of actually very similar to the Anchorage, where it's just like this evasive creature that gives you a little bit of card selection or value, whatever way you want to put it. Probably worse than the other ones, I would say.
Right? Yeah. B minus for this one?
Yeah, B minus for Restless Vents. They're all restless. Didn't notice that. Next one is the Restless Ridgeline. Enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add red or green. 2 red-green. It becomes a 3/4 red and green dino until end of turn. It's still a land. And when it attacks, another target attacking creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Untap that land or untap that creature.
Yeah, another good one. Like these are all really good, but I think this one's another B minus.
Yep, totally agree with that. And our last one here is Restless Prairie, which definitely has the best creature type. So this is the green-white enters tapped. 2 green-white. Restless Prairie becomes a 3/3 green and white llama creature until end of turn. And when it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn.
I feel like this one is less good than it reads, if that makes sense.
You're paying...
Like I want to give this a B minus as well. I still think it's great, but it's 4 mana to become a 3/3. You're not really going to be able to get multiple. Like there's going to be spots where it can't attack because their opponent has an X4 or whatever, and so you need that overrun to kind of win you the game. And I don't know if green-white's going wide enough to do that consistently. So still a really good card, still happy to pick it, but I'm going to give this one a B minus as well.
Yeah, I have the same vibe. I think the other ones are a little more, okay, dust is settled, I get in, I attack with my 4/4 death touch for my flyer. This one's like, all right, I'm just using this to close the game. Like if you think I've had the Restless Cottage played out, where you're just like, all right, wake that up, get in, like that just kept getting in often as the you kind of ground out the game and the board is kind of empty. This one's not going to be that. This is like the attack once, finish the game. Still good though.
Are you joining me then?
B-? Yeah, I'll join with B minus. I'll just read these last ones here. Just a few more lands to close this out. Cavern of Souls, a expensive reprint here. Mythic, enters the battlefield. You choose a creature type. Tap to add Colorless, or tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend the mana only to cast creature spells of the chosen type, and that spell cannot be countered.
Yeah, so I know you want to wrap this up, but I want to spend just a minute
Oh yeah,
talking about
I,
this.
I would I was going to as
Um,
well. Great.
okay, so for this to be as good as a basic, right? Like in most decks, you're gonna have 9 of one basic and 8 of the other,
Hmm.
right? So let's say you're 9 white and 8 blue. Well, your planes is gonna help you cast 13 cards plus in your deck,
Yeah.
and your island is going to help you cast 12 or less cards in your deck, like give or take, roughly, right?
Hmm.
So a plains is colorless for blue cards, and it adds mana for white cards. So for this to be just as good as a basic, you need to basically have like 12 of that creature type just to be like as good as a basic. So that just kind of should put this in context. It's nowhere near as good as it would be in constructed. That being said, if you do have that density of a certain creature type, I'd be happy to play this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's definitely good to give that rider these cards with constructed pedigrees tend to get drafted a little bit higher than they probably should if people are just trying to win games of limited. And I honestly I really liked what you said at the end there, where it's just like, yeah, you don't just see this as like constructed card, just pass it along. There are going to be some times where it actually is going to help your mana base.
Well, the most likely deck in this format is going to be dinos,
Yes.
right? Because even if you have a ton of gnomes, you don't need to make
Yeah,
color
they can't be countered.
So, but I think people are going to be like, "Oh, I have like 8 dinos. Like, I'm going to put the Cavern of Souls in my deck," and I just
No,
wouldn't.
I agree with that. So, what do you give it? Like, if you let's just say you have, it's almost just like a dual land, right? If you do have 13, 14 cards that you can cast off of this, is kind of the way you want to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a build around C plus.
Yeah, and it's not like you're gonna build around it; you just like kind of fall into it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like the
a
C plus.
synergy C plus.
Sure, sure. Echoing Deeps.
Sure.
We've got a rare cave here. This is a colorless land. Enters the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land card in your graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types, and adds colorless mana.
Yeah, so if you're desperate for caves, you'll play it,
Mm-hmm.
but not a great card and like
No.
kind of a disappointing one to have as a rare slot for the cave deck.
Yeah, just doesn't like. What are you trying to accomplish here? I guess the colorless is kind of a not exactly accurate because you're going to be able to copy something with the color. Hmm. Yeah, that's just whatever. Like you said, I
Like
think
a D plus.
yeah, D plus. Sure. If you're in the cave deck, you might want a cave.
Yeah.
Last card, closing it out here. Sunken Citadel. Rare. Cave. Enters the battlefield tapped. As it enters, you choose a color. You can tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color. So we've seen these cards, fairly consistently at this point now. Sort of an evolving wilds that you don't have to go search your deck for, and don't have to put basic in your deck for. Other ability here is add 2 mana of the chosen color, that whatever you chose, same thing, and spend this mana only to activate abilities of lands.
Right. So this is kind of this is the payoff for caves, but it's also a card that most decks want anyways.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's like a C plus. You're happy to play this in basically any deck, and especially if you are splashing or something.
I'm gonna give this a B minus. I
B
think there's
minus.
not like a lot of duels, and then that ability to like anytime a card taps for 2 mana, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's usually quite powerful. And
Yes.
there's a lot of lands with abilities here. So
All right.
yeah,
Well, that's gonna be the end of our excellent set review, Mark. Thank you, of course, once again. You're ever insightful and, of course, very fun to be around. I enjoy these quite a bit. I hope you do too. Any final words for our listeners and watchers out there going into maybe their pre-release this weekend or first week of draft?
yeah. So a lot of words on this set, so it's gonna be tough to pre-release. I'm sure both players are gonna miss interactions or
Yeah.
how cards work. So don't worry about that. That happens to everybody. Have a good time. I think this set's really interesting puzzle to figure out initially. Like the gears are turning in my head trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how some of these decks are going to play out. The rares and mythics we saw today, kind of, I guess we'll just do maybe a quick summary if you want to do this of each of the color pairs and
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
that shakes out just to wrap it up.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so blue white was artifact based, and we saw I think quite a lot of support for that in the blue and the white rares. Blue black was descended, and blue black was a little the rares that you saw for that almost wanted you to already be in that deck
Right.
rather than this is a reason to do that. So I do think blue black's maybe not as well supported as some of the other pairs. Black red is around descended, and we didn't there's rares that kind of do that by discarding cards or sacrificing things. So I think that's there, but that one's a little bit harder for me to put my finger on. Red green being dinos, super well supported across the rares. Tons of like amazing dinosaurs in both red and green. Green white, again, not a lot of support, so I don't think it's going to be that likely to go into green white. Even though the mythic is fantastic, there's not a lot of cards that support it on the rare side in either white or green. Going into the enemy color pairs, white black is around sacrifice. We saw the rares kind of pull you in other directions here, so interested to see if black white might have some more depth to it than just being like a straight up sacrifice deck. Black green being descended, I'm, as I said yesterday, kind of a non-believer. Same thing with green blue explorer. My vote for the worst color pair in the set. Blue red looks fantastic, and we saw some really good artifacts in blue and red, as well as a great mythic payoff if you happen to open the Sahili. And then red white is another one that's tough to put my finger on, but I'm optimistic for red white, especially with that busted Krenko or whatever being just a rare, not a mythic. Like when you open that, you're going to be happy to go into that deck. So I do think there's a kind of almost a bit of a divide already, but looking forward to getting my hands on some of these cards and seeing how they play out next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few questions in chat just about like, you know, if you don't have time to, maybe you're just catching the end of the set review, or maybe you only listen to the rares or mythic, or you just want our initial or our final judgment after doing the whole set review. Do you have a feel for yourself of just stronger or weaker colors?
So my vote is, I think blue is going to be the best color for me at least. It might not be on stats because blue tends to have an issue where it doesn't necessarily get drafted as straightforwardly as some other colors. So I would say blue as the best, green as the worst. Then in the middle, pretty close, I think, between red, white, and black. Like I like all of those colors.
Yep.
Maybe red's the weakest out of the three of those, but having a braid and a ton of great rares means I think there's a good chance you'll be red in a good number of drafts.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I would also say one other thing people are asking, how many permanents do you need in your Descend decks? Just try to have as many as possible, right? You just want to not miss, basically, when you're milling or you're doing whatever. The more the merrier. Obviously, your deck's not going to be all permanent. You're going to have a few removal spells in there that are likely going to be instants and sorceries. But yeah, the more the merrier. The more streamlined your deck is, the more just straightforward and linear it is, the more the mechanics going to pay you off, and not going to be stuck with like, I'm at Descend 6 and my cards aren't on and I can't attack with my sweet 8/8 Mythic.
Yeah, I do think you're gonna, when you have a close pick, it'll always be take the permanent over the spell. Like even Dead Drop or whatever it is, the -5/-5. I think that's a pretty low priority in blue black if you've decided that you have enough payoffs that you really want to get to Descend at 8.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Okay, let's shut her down. Chat, thanks for being a great chat. Everybody watching on YouTube, thanks for watching this far. Leave a like if you so choose. It would very much help the channel. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, well, you're going to get a bunch of content coming your way. And of course, on the YouTube channel, the set overview is coming out in the next few days, probably after pre-release weekend. My tier list is going to be going up probably with that set overview as well. If you've not watch or listen for a set overview, basically I condense all the stuff we talk about here and also some additional thoughts I have over the next few days, and all for prepping you for the first week of drafts. There's also going to be the early access event for streamers on Thursday, so tomorrow, if you're watching this pretty recently after it releases, that's going to be another kind of like window open to seeing the set and seeing how the cards play out, seeing if our theories are right. So stay tuned, bunch of content coming your way. And once again, Mark, I just want to say thank you, and we'll see y'all next time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure, and I look forward to doing the next one.
Great. All right. Yeah, thanks, chat. That was very actually wasn't too bad. Under 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, we got, well, no bonus sheet helps a lot.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
There was a lot of flip cards and backside to those. So.
Yeah, but we're definitely getting better at just like breezing through some of the ones that don't need to talk about that much. Anyways, I'm gonna pack up chat. This is gonna be up on the YouTube in a few hours, most likely. If you have not caught it, of course you can check the Twitch VOD as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Oh, let me actually.
Good luck getting it up before 3 a.m. this time.
Yeah, I'll try my best, and I'm just posting the links in chat for anybody who wants to follow the YouTube or the podcast feed or any of that. All right, bye everybody.
Okay, good night. Thanks.